So this time, we've got this little menace to society who gets isekai'd, just like any other 17-year-old Japanese nobody, to go save some other world. He winds up in the heavens with a seriously stacked goddess who gives him the standard cliché rundown and hands out a special talent. Next thing you know, he and his buddies land in a peaceful-looking kingdom. But then, weirdly enough, he gets reincarnated again. So, he's back in front of the stacked goddess, who's completely baffled, but according to the rules of the cosmos, she's got to give him another talent. This happens a grand total of 10 times, and with each reset, he snags another ridiculously overpowered talent. Right when he's getting tired of the whole infinite loop, he finally gets to actually stay in one of these worlds. The catch? In this world, he's supposedly total trash, or at least, that's the cover story. Our boy hid his talents better than I hide my search history from my girlfriend. And thank you, Elaine, she's pretty cute. Anyway, this kingdom turned out to be a massive trap. Turns out, everyone wanted the heroes dead. And his instructor? She was this stacked blonde, basically a version 2.0. So our boy Takafuji had to play some serious 4D chess to keep from getting exposed, while also making sure he didn't seem so useless they just decided to get rid of him. Quick spoiler alert, by the way, Takafuji's showdown with that stacked blonde instructor was absolutely legendary. Alright, I'm done with the spoilers, let's get into it. A girl with red eyes walks up, and someone calls out the name Leori. She places her hand on his face, and he's clearly confused, with no idea who she is. And then, blood flies everywhere. She just killed the kid. Someone dryly notes, that one lasted a long time. The knife clatters to the ground as she tumbles into some kind of void. The boy's last thoughts are a mix of confusion. Did I really just get stabbed by a girl who was crying? And how did she know my name? Lost in these questions, he suddenly wakes up, finding himself back in his classroom reading a manga. By the way, our protagonist's name is Takafu Julian Norori, and he's 17 years old. He's completely confused, trying to make sense of that crazy dream, but here he is in the same old classroom. Every day was exactly the same, or at least, it was supposed to be. Out of nowhere, a magic circle flares to life around the entire classroom, and a massive burst of purple energy erupts. Everyone covers their faces, and when the light fades, Takafuji finds himself on the floor, completely disoriented. He's now standing beside his classmates, totally unable to process how any of them ended up in this place. As you can imagine, everyone is in a full-blown panic, screaming and wondering where the heck their classroom vanished to. Right then, an angelic figure appears and tells everyone to calm down. She explains they're in the path of souls, a void between worlds, and that she's what you'd call a goddess. The reason? They've all been summoned to a new world to become heroes and defeat the Demon King. So far, this is textbook isekai stuff. But just wait, because things are about to get insane. Naturally, all the kids are just standing there looking totally dumbfounded, trying to wrap their heads around this whole hero business. The goddess continues, explaining they're being transported to a world called Burge, into an empire known as Harem. The poor kids are just standing there with their jaws on the floor, not really processing any of this. Takafuji, on the other hand, is just thinking how this is a carbon copy of every isekai plot ever. Anyway, the goddess continues her explanation, saying they'll be leaving this place soon to head to the other world. But before that happens, each and every one of them will receive a gift. A light glows from her hand above each of their heads as she tells them they are about to receive a special ability. She warns them not to be corrupted by this power and to lead the people justly. After wishing them good luck, the scene cuts to inside a castle. Slowly, Takafuji opens his eyes to find himself in a large chamber with the rest of his class. A girl with a weary look on her face says that apparently the summoning was a success. A bunch of old men around them start cheering, going on about how the saint is truly dependable. They're all convinced the world is finally going to be safe again. Right before they tell everyone to quiet down, a man stands up and expresses his gratitude to them for coming to this world. He introduces himself as Lassen, the emperor of the Heian Empire. This guy, the emperor, actually kneels down, and along with everyone else in the hall, begs them to defeat the Demon King. Takafuji thinks to himself that at least they're being treated like nobility. Just then, some kid wearing glasses steps forward and asks His Majesty to please stand. He then asks if there's any way for them to get back to their original world. Another figure steps forward, saying she can answer that question. The girl introduces herself as Saint Aya and confirms that they can, in fact, return to their own world. However, she explains that this will only be possible in 1 month when the full moon is once again in the sky. And with that, anyone who doesn't want to fight the Demon King can just live peacefully in the castle for a month and then go home. Our boy thinks to himself that this is starting to sound like a 1-month vacation package to another world. The girls start worrying about what's going to happen over the next month while they're gone, but according to the Saint's explanation, the timeline in their original world will be totally frozen, and they'll pop right back to the exact moment they left. Our boy, however, thinks this whole deal sounds a little too good to be true. Something's definitely fishy. The Saint then asks if anyone wants to head back after the month is up, promising that all they have to do is say the word and nobody will stop them. The whole group looks like they're about to jump at the offer, but she quickly starts begging them to save her country and this entire world. Takafuji's thinking to himself that this is usually the part where some hot-headed hero wannabe steps up and grandly declares they'll fight for justice, but all he gets is dead silence, which pretty much confirms his class is fresh out of heroes. Just then, the kid with glasses points out that everyone's feeling a bit on edge and asks if they can put off the decision for a bit. The king is just standing there with his eyes shut, and our boy notes that, for now, everyone's keeping their cool. Then Lesson chimes in, explaining that in 1 month, they'll get to choose. Either go back to their own world or sign on the dotted line to become official heroes right here. He declares today a celebration and tells them to enjoy the party. Our boy thanks him and makes a beeline for the food. I mean, getting to taste the cuisine of another world, it's a perfect opportunity. He's totally stoked to see what kind of crazy ingredients a fantasy world has to offer. But just then, the exact same portal that snatched him from his classroom appears right under his feet again. He figures it has to be the work of the Empire's mages, who've apparently gotten their summoning magic down to a science. Man, he's so ready to dive into everything this fantasy world has to offer. But then someone shouts his name, demanding to know why he's the only one standing in a magic circle. Before he can even figure out what's going on, he's zapped right back to where he first met the saint, the so-called Path of Souls. The blonde goddess shows up, introduces herself again, but looks a little puzzled. He just casually says, "Hey, we meet again." But she's like, "Weren't you just here a second ago?" He's just like, "Yep, I was." The poor girl seems totally baffled by the whole situation. He asks if this means he's getting summoned somewhere else now, and she's just like, "Probably. The thing is, there's a rule that anyone who passes through this place has to get a special talent," so she puts her hand on his head all over again. She wishes him good luck, but our boy can't help but complain that getting bounced around like a pinball is pretty reckless. And while all this is happening, he notices that the last summoning circle was purple, but this new one is yellow with completely different symbols. Then it hits him, he's tied to a chair with a gag in his mouth, and he realizes this is probably not the best time for a detailed analysis. An old man walks up, declaring the summoning a success. Another guy next to him chimes in, saying the boy will now be known as test subject number 12. The old guy gets closer, observing that it looks like he has some kind of offensive-type magic eye. Being called a test subject really doesn't sit well with Takafuji. He is not on board with this situation one bit. It's dawning on him that these summonings are way more dangerous than he first thought. The two mad scientists start grinning, announcing that it's time to proceed with the experiment. It's painfully obvious to our boy that he's dealing with a couple of stereotypical mad scientists. One of them steps forward, brandishing a scalpel, and says it's time to find out what that magic eye of his is all about. The old geezer explains that ancient records say humans summoned from other worlds always develop a magic eye when they arrive, and his life's work is to prove those records are true. Our boy instantly puts two and two together. This so-called magic eye has to be the gift the goddess gave him when he first got here. The old man holds out his hand, explaining that things could get messy if the boy were to, say, have a little tantrum or lose control, and that's why they're going to put him under hypnosis. For a split second, Takafuji is taken aback, but then he just calmly watches the man weave his magic circle. The old scientist realizes that not only is the spell having a minimal effect, it looks like it's not working at all. The real kicker is that this is supposed to be a top-tier, advanced hypnosis spell. Takafuji can't help but think it's hilarious that this is what passes for advanced magic. At that moment, the other guy yells for the doctor. Turns out, Takuji's left eye holds the magic eye of time, while his right eye contains the magic eye of truth. The man is absolutely stunned and starts celebrating, shouting that having two magic eyes of this power is practically unheard of. Without a second's hesitation, they whip out their tools, declaring that they have to start testing immediately because this is just too incredible. However, Takafuji knows that if they start cutting him up without any hypnosis, it's going to be a one-way ticket to Pain Town. He is absolutely not down for that, and he starts wondering if he can use his magic eyes to get out of this mess. Out of nowhere, a glowing circle erupts under his feet. While the scientists are totally baffled, our guy and us know exactly what's coming next. And just like that, he's back in front of the goddess who's looking as clueless as ever. She jokes, "This is the third time. You must really like me." Huh. But our hero just deadpans that it's unavoidable. He then asks if she has any clue why he's on this cosmic merry-go-round. She's stumped, admitting this is a first, and she'll have to look into it. It dawns on Tapui that he's been yo-yoed back here so often, he's now just casually shooting the breeze with an actual goddess. But before he can get a straight answer, poof, he's teleported again, this time in front of a young noblewoman. An elf is hyping her up, saying it's incredible she summoned a humanoid monster on her very first try. Our boy, however, wasn't exactly thrilled about being called a monster. In that world, they treated him like some kind of beast and tried to slap him with a subordination contract. But before they could, the magic circle flared up again, and he reappeared before the goddess, this time with a grin on his face. She's like, "Aren't you getting tired of this?" But all he wants is an explanation for the constant summoning. She tells him she might have a theory, but they're short on time, so she gives him the quick version. Apparently, Summoning targets need a powerful soul just to make the jump between worlds, and as it turns out, his soul is incredibly strong and super rare. Takafuji's just like, but I'm not a saint or even a particularly good guy. He finds it weird that he'd have such a pure soul, but she corrects him, it's not about purity, it's about raw power. The solution? He needs to bind his soul to one of these worlds by activating a hero's contract, which will finally put a stop to all the teleporting. The scene then cuts to a castle, where a girl with an orb informs him he's gained the power to steal abilities. He can't help but notice she's stunning, and just like that, his fourth summoning comes with another awesome perk. He makes a beeline for her, ready to lock in that hero contract. But just as he's about to seal the deal, the teleportation kicks in again. On his fifth go-around, he's pulled in by some dark magic. The summoner is a mess, exhausted, sweating, clothes in tatters while he just pops in, cool as a cucumber, on a castle atop Pico Mountain. For the sixth summoning, he arrives as the resurrected demon lord to a massive monster party. But cutting back to his time in the sky, the goddess notes that he's been stacking up some seriously incredible powers. He's impressed himself. Then she drops the big news. The next summoning is likely the final one. Because of that, she's going to merge all his abilities into one package. She tells him to check his status as soon as he lands, saying he should be able to view it with his right eye. Back in a castle, someone is welcoming the hero. He calmly opens his eyes, thinking to himself, all right, here we go again. But this time, something's different. He's not alone. He's standing with a high school kid named Ryu Shinsaki and a girl named Tamaki Kurosawa. She calls out to her friends, and a third girl, Eli Isagi, shows up. Just then, a voice booms from the throne. The king declares that, according to legend, they must be the heroes. Our protagonist quickly realizes that everyone else in this summoning party knows each other. He's the odd one out, and they're all wondering who the random guy is that got summoned with them. All eyes turn to the king, who asks, so, are the three of you the heroes, and this guy was just an extra who got caught in the crossfire? The trio confirms it, and the king admits he's never seen anything like it. Just then, another young woman arrives, asking if they are indeed the heroes from another world. She introduces herself as the first princess, proudly taking all the credit for summoning them and telling them they should be grateful. Our guy instantly pegs her as one of those times arrogant, self-important royal types. She begins her briefing, informing them they've arrived in the Kingdom of the Rising Sun, a land inhabited not just by humans, but also demi-humans and demons. And, surprise, surprise, the demons are the bad guys, led by the Demon King. They've got their own nation and are currently on an invasion spree across the land. This Demon King sounds like a serious threat, so you better watch your backs. This whole mess is why humanity pooled its resources to summon heroes, a ritual that, conveniently, only royal women can perform, and of course, she just had times to be the one chosen for the job. The deal is, each country has to train the heroes they summon to go and take down the Demon King. She finishes as if it's the most brilliant plan ever conceived. Takafuji, however, sees right through it. Their grand strategy is to just summon a bunch of random people, and pray one of them actually gets the job done. The princess laid it on thick, telling them to power up as the kingdom's champions and take out that no-good Demon King. Just then, Tamaki cut in, asking the million-dollar question, how were they supposed to get back to their own world? The princess just flat out told her it was a one-way trip. She basically said they should feel honored to be the proud heroes of the Sun Kingdom and just be grateful for the opportunity. Our boy, meanwhile, was absolutely steaming, thinking these clowns seriously needed to take some customer service lessons from the Hyjin Kingdom. The king then had them do the classic touch the magic stone routine to see what hero powers they got. They rolled out this tablet, and when Reo put his hand on it, boom, he got the limit break ability. Oeasogi snagged the magic barrier skill, and Kurosawa landed magic affinity. Meanwhile, our dear Takafuji got the detection ability. Hey, at least it was a blessing, right? But it sounded pretty basic. Definitely not a showstopper. After the big reveal, the kingdom's staff started running diagnostics on their stats and magic levels. Ryu turned out to be a physical powerhouse. Oe had a natural talent for creating blessings, and her magic power was off the charts. Tamaki also had some serious magic skills, but hers were all about blowing stuff up. As for our boy, yeah, he had zero aptitude for magic whatsoever. It slowly dawned on him that he got isekai'd just to be weaker than all the girls, a fact he was not thrilled about. Already so done, he was just sprawled out on the floor, muttering that it didn't matter, since they were obviously the real heroes here. Later that night, the group met up in Ryu's room to talk strategy, and our boy couldn't help but look around, wondering why Ryu's room was way bigger than his. Meanwhile, the two girls were basically asking why he was even invited to the hero meeting if he wasn't one. Ouch. That one definitely stung, but our boy just kept his mouth shut. Tamaki then claimed she wasn't really worried about him, but he could totally tell she was concerned he'd get in over his head. Yeah, she was a classic tsundere, not one to admit her true feelings. Ryu, ever the leader, chimed in that the detection ability could actually be a game changer. Takafuji realized everyone in the room had a completely different take on him. Ryu then suggested that even if he was weak, Owie could just slap a magic barrier on him for protection. She quietly agreed, saying if that's what he wanted, she'd do it. Our guy couldn't help but think that for such a quiet person, she was actually super cute. And that's when it hit him all three of his companions were total knockouts, just three genetically blessed people. Anyway, Tamaki brought the conversation back on track, questioning if they should really trust this country. Ryu was about to respond, but another voice cut in, casually remarking that the country wasn't half bad and the accommodations were pretty sweet. Everyone turned to see our boy frantically signaling them to shut up. He'd scribbled in his notebook that they were being eavesdropped on, so it was best not to say anything sketchy. The other three just stared, completely stunned, as it dawned on him that his supposedly lame detection blessing was already paying off. Sure, he couldn't fight or cast a spell to save his life, but this was a seriously incredible skill. He could literally sense people or creatures right through solid walls. Like right now, for instance, he knew exactly who was listening in from the hallway. It reminded him of back in his room, when he kept trying to get the maids to leave him alone, but they'd always find a reason to come back. So, he quickly wrote another note asking O to put up a soundproof barrier. Figuring it was worth a shot, she started chanting as a magic circle expanded around them. She warned them it wasn't a very strong barrier and wouldn't hold for long. Ryu immediately praised her, calling her amazing, which made her blush and get all flustered. Meanwhile, Takafuji was just thinking, great, now they're going to start flirting right in front of me. Tamaki, ignoring them, demanded to know why the kingdom was spying on them to begin with. Ryu explained that it was pretty obvious. They were heroes with enough firepower to level a country, so of course the kingdom wouldn't just let them run around unsupervised. But she shot back angrily that it made zero sense, since they didn't ask to be summoned here. That's when Takafuji chimed in, saying he thought the kingdom seemed pretty desperate. He admitted he didn't know the standards of this world, but he had a hunch they were broke. For one thing, the king was way too hands-on with a ton of different matters, which was a major red flag. On top of that, for a castle this massive, there were surprisingly few vassals. Tamaki added that she'd noticed that, too. But on the bright side, the food was amazing. It was simple stuff, but packed with spices and delicious flavors. Takafuji, on the other hand, Ryu explained that it was pretty obvious. They were heroes with enough firepower to level a country, so of course the kingdom wouldn't just let them run around unsupervised. Like right now, for instance, he knew exactly who was listening in from the hallway. It reminded him of back in his room, when he kept trying to get the maids to leave him alone. Ryu explained that it was pretty obvious. They were heroes with enough firepower to level a country, so of course the kingdom wouldn't just let them run around unsupervised. On top of that, they had to figure out how to get back to their own world and ditch this place for good. Seeing as the kingdom considered them its one and only hope, there was no way they'd just let that hope pack up and go home, which was a major red flag. On top of that, for a castle this massive, there were surprisingly few vassals. Tamaki added that she'd noticed that he admitted he didn't know the standards of this world, but he had a hunch they were broke. For one thing, the king was way too hands-on with a ton of different matters. She pointed out his yellow eye and asked what was up with it. Our hero totally panicked and slapped a hand over his face, realizing he'd completely forgotten about that little detail. After all, it's not every day you see a Japanese person with a yellow eye. But Ryu, being the cool guy he is, just said that everyone has secrets they'd rather keep, so it was best to just let it go. He chalked it up to a classic teenage phase, you know, something you eventually grow out of. For now, they should all just pretend they don't see it. Our guy realized Ryu probably thought he was just wearing a colored contact to look all cool and edgy, like some anime protagonist. And honestly, that was a perfect cover story. So he leaned into it, telling them to behold the power of his mystical eye. Later, back in his room, he was seriously wondering what the heck was going on. He pulled up his status screen and holy crap, there were a ton of stats listed. The only problem was, just like us watching, he had no idea what the average was in this world, so he couldn't tell if he was super OP or a total weakling. But based on how badly he bombed the physical tests, he figured something was definitely off. That's when he decided to check his skills and found out he had a different power in each eye. He had the Demon King's dark magic, the power to steal abilities, and of course, detection. Then his eyes landed on some really weird attributes. Stuff he probably got when he was summoned as a monster. It said he was part of the demonic race, specifically a vampire with the rank of Baron, and he had a debuff called Hatred of the Sun God. During the day, all his stats dropped to 1/10 of their power, and he couldn't even use his skills. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. He totally failed the test because they were out in the sun, and the food tasted like garbage because it was loaded with garlic. Not to mention, whenever he looked at the girls, he'd get this weird urge to just bite their necks and chug some fresh blood. This whole time, he'd been so obsessed with using his detection skill that he never stopped to check his own body's status. Multiple weird eyes, vampire traits, and a whole cocktail of other mutations. He didn't even know what he was anymore. Slowly but surely, the memories of everything that went down started flooding back. After putting all the pieces together, here's the rundown of his new powers. His detection skill lets him sense anyone nearby. He then grabs an old spoon to demonstrate another power. He can absorb the energy from an object and forge it into a weapon. Just like that, the cast iron spoon morphs into a sharp knife. Now for the red eye. It's got motion detection, absolute measurement, long-range vision, microscopic vision, night vision, clairvoyance, illusions, X-ray vision, photographic memory, and even the ability to sense when he's being watched. Man, what a crazy list. He figures out that at least they're all vision-based powers. It's like he's got eye version 2.0. The one that's still a mystery, though, is the yellow eye. According to the description, any magic circle he sees with that eye gets copied onto his pupil, and he can activate it whenever he wants. He makes a mental note to seriously study this world's magic later. The skill list is crazy long, and there's a bunch of stuff he doesn't get yet. At least the whole vampire thing seems pretty straightforward. If he drinks enough of someone's blood to finish them off, they reanimate as a ghoul. If his victim is a virgin, they'll become a lesser vampire under his command when he drinks their blood. If they aren't, the person just becomes a regular ghoul. He also has another option. He can just take someone out, give them a drop of his own blood, and they'll be resurrected as his loyal servant. But here are the two coolest parts. If he drains someone completely dry, he can absorb all their memories and even steal their skills, as long as he can use his full powers freely at night. Getting stronger won't be a problem. First, though, he needs to get a handle on this new body and this world. The very next day, under the morning sun, a woman introduces herself as the Knight Commander of the Kingdom of the Rising Sunday. This particular blonde's name is Arya. Our boy, whose views are a little, let's say, traditional, thinks it's wild that there's a female Knight Commander in this place. He figures that's either just a fantasy world thing, or maybe the kingdom is having some serious budget cuts. Arya then tells the two girls that while they clearly have a knack for magic, they still need to learn the fundamentals of combat. She says they'd normally start with basic strength training, but for them, it's probably not necessary. Our guy, on the other hand, is not thrilled to hear this. Turns out, his stats are pretty pathetic in comparison. Ryu's got 1,500 strength, and all his other stats are over 1,000. Even Tamaki has more HP than he does. Plus, she's rocking 3,500 intuition, while Elway has a little less of that, but is stronger in every other category. The other three showed up with stats that already blow past the limits of any normal human in this world. So, Ayana tells them to pick whatever fighting style they like and they'll learn the basics later. But for the fool over there, it's a different story. She warns him that they've got to build up his physical strength first. The only problem is, he's stuck doing push-ups in the sun, which is absolutely wrecking his attributes. Not only is he weaker in the daytime, but he's also getting a killer headache. Ayana says she's going to train him personally, so he'd better get serious. But the poor dude is already seeing stars, and it's clear there's no getting out of this. Just then, the super annoying princess asks for permission to enter with her entourage, a sentiment Takafuji completely agrees with. And of course, she wasn't by herself. She had a few other people with her. The woman standing right next to the princess was clearly another big shot, given how close she was. She was a stunning woman, but her expression was totally cold, like a doll with a pasted-on smile. Ayana greeted the princesses and asked what brought them to the training grounds. Takafuji instantly dropped his training and just sat back, totally relaxed, eager to see how this little drama would play out. The other girl gave a polite greeting, while the annoying princess declared dramatically that she'd cleared her busy schedule just to say hi, so everyone should be thankful. Our hero just scoffed at her antics until the other woman stepped forward. She introduced herself as the second princess, saying it was a pleasure to meet him and that she wanted to have a little chat. The scene cuts to a chamber inside the castle. Standing in front of a blackboard, she explains that this is where they'll be having their lessons. He can't help but feel it's super suspicious that he's getting a private lesson. The other heroes are getting lessons too, but from the first princess in a completely different room. The real reason for all this? The first princess flat out refused to teach someone who wasn't a hero. To her, the very idea was an insult, a total joke. He didn't really care all that much, but he silently vowed to get back at her for this someday. The second princess announced she was starting the lesson, but our guy had a few questions first. He asked if the first princess was older, since she was, you know, the second princess. But she explained that it wasn't that simple. Apparently, things were complicated. To put it simply, she said the first princess was the true heir to the throne. Takafuji already knew that royal succession is always a messy business, and obviously, he wanted absolutely no part in that kind of drama. During the lesson, he learned that the Kingdom of the Rising Sun was founded by the hero who took down the last Demon King. It turns out that hero was a mage. In other words, the founder of this whole kingdom was a witch, which explains why witch worship is so deeply ingrained in their culture. The throne has always been passed down through the female line. The queens choose a king to marry, and only then does he become a regent to help rule the country. But if the queen ever asks for a divorce, he's out of a job as king. Thanks to the second princess, he got a crash course on the kingdom's history and the basics of magic. By the end of it, though, he was so wiped out, he just fell asleep. Later that night, he forced himself to start studying magic since there was a practical test the next day. At least he managed to snag a book from the second princess. He could tell she wasn't happy about him dozing off in her class, and she probably wasn't thrilled about him asking for a book either. But, just like a perfect doll, she just put on that smile and said it was fine. Staring down at the pentagram in the book, he decided it was time to test out the one thing he couldn't pull off the night before. Firing up his true mystic eye, he stared at the magic circle. Theoretically, he should have been able to copy it right into his retina, letting him use it on demand. The only problem? Absolutely nothing happened. He wasn't even sure the eye was working. He tried it on other magic circles, too, but just as he suspected, still nothing. So far, the whole experiment was a massive failure. Then it hit him he had the 2.0 eye. Spotting some paper nearby, he grabbed it and started sketching out the magic circles. The vision in that eye was so ridiculously sharp, he could perfectly remember every single circle he'd seen before being isekai'd to this world. Technically, that should have been impossible because of the old geezer's hypnosis. But this eye was a whole different ballgame. He drew the circles with absolute ease. As he stared down at the paper, a strange energy radiated from his eye, a feeling he'd never experienced before. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally gotten the thing to work. Eager to put it to the test, he rang a small bell. A maid walked in, asking if he'd summoned her, and our hero explained he just needed a small favor. Before she could even process his words, he activated his eye and nailed the old man's hypnosis spell. A second later, her eyes glazed over, completely unfocused. He waved a hand in front of her face and confirmed the magic had taken hold. To test its limits, he cheekily asked what color her underwear was, and she deadpanned the answer. He drew the circles with absolute ease. As he stared down at the paper, a strange energy radiated from his eye, a feeling he'd never experienced before. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally gotten the thing to work. Maybe his magic-stealing ability could only store circles from the same world he'd acquired it in. If that were true, the only real magic he'd have at his disposal was some fancy hypnosis. That was one possibility, but he couldn't be certain. After all, during his summons to other worlds, he'd seen countless magic circles. If he just focused hard enough, maybe he could bring those to life too. With that thought, he focused on one, and bam, he successfully created the magic circle right before his eyes. But instead of getting yeeted to another world, black, he felt a little dumb for even asking. After all, didn't he have X-ray vision? With everything that had happened, he started to wonder. He was just teleported to a nearby forest. It looked like he could use this as a short-range teleportation spell. He realized he could even combine his red eye's telescopic vision with the yellow eye's portal ability. Next, he touched a wall and summoned a dark magic circle. This new ability let him control inanimate objects, moving them around freely, and even store them inside his own shadow. Anything under the spell's control couldn't interact with the physical world. However, he could release his hold on them, allowing them to interact normally again. While it was a handy spell, it came with some pretty inconvenient limitations. On top of that, his dark magic also gave him Shadow Step. This skill let him merge into one surface and pop out from another one nearby. But when he stepped inside a thin tree, things felt off. It felt like he was standing in a wide open space. He then decided to give his creation ability another shot. He focused on a nearby rock, which began to dissolve and then reshape itself into a sword. Focusing his mind, he recalled every single move his eye had captured from the commander. He'd memorized the entire sequence with just one look and now effortlessly executed the exact same slashes. Since it was now nighttime, he planned to practice as much as he could, figuring he'd be totally exhausted by morning anyway. After a while, he was completely gassed, but he had a gut feeling that something had definitely improved. Just then, a system window popped up, announcing he had obtained Swordsmanship Level 1. And just like that, he finally understood how to unlock new abilities. Now all he had to do was figure out how to level them up. Using his detection ability, he sensed something moving close by. Peeking out from the bushes, he spotted some kind of monstrous rabbit carrying another creature in its jaws. The victim looked like a bird, but strangely, it was covered in fur. He quickly used his identification skill and found out it was a demon bird gecko. The only problem was, judging by its stats, the little critter was actually pretty darn strong. He then recalled hearing some folks back at the castle mention that this creature's feathers were used in all sorts of things, which made him wonder how a bunch of normal people were managing to hunt them. As he ventured deeper into the forest, he found other creatures that seemed a bit weaker. However, the lowest stat he saw on any of them was 600, and some were even stronger than him. Clearly, he'd stumbled into a high-level monster zone, which was a huge problem. With his current stats, he was pretty confident he could win a one-on-one fight. The real issue was that the chances of getting swarmed by multiple enemies were extremely high. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the stunningly beautiful Iana was walking the halls, calling out for her highness. She assured the second princess the area was secure, but warned her that wandering around alone at night was still a bad idea. However, clearly, he'd stumbled into a high-level monster zone, which was a huge problem. With his current stats, he was pretty confident he could win a one-on-one fight. The commander confirmed that none of the heroes were using artifacts just yet. The girl pushed, asking why, and pointing out that they would have to use them sooner or later. The woman glanced away for a moment before explaining that while artifacts certainly increase power, these heroes just weren't ready for them. Without a solid foundation of physical and mental strength, they could become far too dependent on them. That's why, for now, the best course of action was to monitor their progress and prepare them gradually. The girl lowered her eyes and then smiled, saying that she really should have known better than to question the strongest human alive. The commander paused for a beat before noting that her smile seemed to have lost its usual sparkle. The second princess turned away, saying she hadn't even noticed. Ayana then pressed for her opinion on the first princess, to which she replied that she knew her sister was talented, dedicated, and an ambitious woman. However, the commander questioned if she truly believed that. The second princess then remarked that the place might be safe from danger, but not from prying ears. She then wished her a good night and departed. The commander stood there, thinking that Princess Arya was being incredibly cautious, but that she had no reason to fear her. A few days passed, and our boy was finally getting acclimated to this world. Of course, the other heroes were making strides, but he was the slowest of the bunch when it came to physical development. From day one, Ryu looked like a natural with a sword, and he was now fully committed to the path of a swordsman. Tamaki had started using a staff, but her approach to magic was weird. She was slamming her spells into the ground like she was swinging a giant hammer, and he couldn't make any sense of it. Meanwhile, Elway was training with a bow. Normally, archers need someone watching their back, but since she could conjure a barrier, it was actually a perfect fit. So, their lineup was Ryu, who was a beast in close combat, Tamaki, who could blow stuff up from any distance, and Awe, who was a self-sufficient archer that could also defend the others. Our boy, on the other hand, had only been getting proper training for the past 3 days. He'd already picked up on the fact they were only teaching him to throw weapons from afar. They were training him in stealth and how to disable traps. It was painfully obvious they wanted to shape him into a scout to make the most of his detection ability. But when night came, he would sneak back into the forest to work on his own skills. At the moment, he was practicing his telekinesis, learning to control objects freely from a distance. He guided a dagger's path through the air, releasing his control at the last possible second to lodge it in a tree. Looking up at the moon, however, he was still seething about that blasted sun curse. He wondered if it would finally vanish once he leveled up. For now, all he could do was keep grinding. Nearby, a demon bird was drooling over its next meal when something came hurtling toward it. What do you know? It was Takafuji, moving at full speed. The guy was practically flying. He was now using his dark mana control combined with telekinesis to restrain creatures. With this technique, he closed the gap in an instant, locked eyes with the beast, and activated his hypnosis. The monster froze on the spot, allowing him to approach without any risk. He finished it off, lifted it with dark magic, and stored it away in the void. This guy could literally just walk into his own pocket dimension, and since he's a vampire, you already know what he was about to do. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was around to see, he partook in the monster's essence. Once he was satisfied, he left the scene. He quickly located his next target, but this creature was just plain hideous, and he knew the flavor wasn't going to be great. Unfortunately, a guy's gotta eat, so he kept hunting until his work was done. As dawn approached, he teleported straight back to his room. This had become his standard nightly routine. The next morning, Mala entered his room, greeted him, and told him to wake up. Our boy had been trying to use hypnosis on her as sparingly as possible, but it was a necessary evil since he needed to gather intel about this kingdom. Through their little chats, he learned that the current queen had been unable to conceive a child for a long time. In a country run by women, that was a massive problem, as the queen had no daughter to inherit the throne. On top of all that, young noble women were mysteriously passing away. To keep their family lines from dying out, they had to accept a noble lady as one of the king's concubines. And that very woman gave birth to a child, who would become Arya, the second princess. She was raised with all the love in the world right up until she turned 7. But it was a necessary evil since he needed to gather intel about this kingdom. Through their little chats, especially since her daughter inherited an insane talent for magic. Just like that, Arya was completely out of the running to be the heir. On top of all that, young noble women were mysteriously passing away. To keep their family lines from dying out, they had to accept a noble lady as one of the king's concubines. But deep down, she knew that from that day on, her entire existence had become meaningless. She was completely forgotten by her own people, cast aside by her own mother, and absolutely no one in the royal family wanted anything to do with her. And that's how Arya was forced to live a lonely life, just like a silent doll, especially since her daughter inherited an insane talent for magic. Just like that, Arya was completely out of the running to be the heir. The second Amanda turned 7, she was automatically named the first princess. While everyone else was celebrating, Arya was stuck in a corner, putting on a brave face and pretending it didn't bother her, especially since she usually left him alone. She then mentioned she'd heard he was learning spy techniques in his training sessions. But everything changed when the actual queen finally had a daughter of her own. Her name was Amanda, which means the beloved girl. And true to her name, the queen adored her far more than the other child, reminding him that even if the lessons were a total drag, they were crucial for his survival. Our boy was completely wiped out, letting out a huge yawn and wondering why she was on his case today. So even though he wasn't a natural at magic, it looked like he had a solid shot at putting his new skills to good use. But our boy shot back that maybe she just saw the upside of being known as the person who trained one of the legendary heroes. The one thing our hero couldn't wrap his head around was why he couldn't use this world's magic properly. He figured it had to be a super rare thing, since even Nala, a regular maid, could juggle multiple objects with ease. But Aaliyah pointed out that Commander Iana Aceto was an incredibly busy woman and wouldn't waste her time training him if she didn't see some kind of potential. That's when Aaliyah slammed her hand on the table and yelled, "No!" She was absolutely convinced he had the potential to become strong, and that's why she needed to see him actually try. Then she added that even though he was supposed to be a hero, people were calling him a failure. She turned to face him and asked, "Doesn't that embarrass you?" Takafuji was left wondering what in the world had gotten into this girl today to make her so fired up. He knew that ever since her life took a turn for the worse, she had been bottling up all her emotions. She had put on such a convincing act that people even started calling her the doll princess. But right then, she was completely different. This wasn't the quiet, reserved girl he was used to. The two of them found themselves standing in front of a massive door. She quickly cast a spell and announced that they would be continuing his training inside this room. Before he could even get a word in to defend himself, she hit him with a quote from the former queen. She then stepped into the room, revealing a massive magic circle etched onto the ceiling. "This will do the trick," she said, before warning him that if he kept this up, he'd be kicked out of the castle for good. He pointed out he had the detection ability, which was pretty useful. She had to agree, but countered that he still wasn't putting in nearly as much effort as the others. As someone with a divine blessing, he needed to grab fate by the horns and give it his all. The thing is, poor Takafuji was always dozing off in class because he was pulling all-nighters, and while she had no idea, he had been busting his butt, hunting in the dead of night. So he told her flat out that he was trying and that he was doing the best he could with what he had. We have no obligation to coddle incompetent people who show up in this kingdom. Our boy, however, still wasn't fazed, and just replied that he wasn't incompetent. As he placed his hand on the door, she told him that no one would be able to hear his screams. Our guy, on the other hand, just wanted to know how to open the darn thing. And that's when she suddenly gave him a dead-eyed stare, lifted her foot, and straight up kicked him in the back. What the heck? He went flying, slamming face first into the wall. His skills just didn't look as flashy as the other three heroes, and he wasn't a bookworm like she was. But then, Aaliyah dropped a bombshell, revealing that this magic room had a special barrier. He had to get one thing straight. Getting kicked out of this castle meant becoming monster food. So, he was going to do whatever it took to stick around, even if it made him look like a total fool. Our boy barely even registered the kick. You'd almost think he had a thing for getting put in his place by tough ladies. That much was obvious. In fact, he was more impressed than anything, realizing the doll-like princess was already gone. Then she laid into him, screaming at him to get a grip on his own life. And out of nowhere, the dude just started cracking up, bursting into a full-on belly laugh. He even blurted out that she was actually a really beautiful girl. He admitted he'd completely misjudged her and never pegged her as someone with so much fire. Naturally, she shot back, asking if he was making fun of her, but he swore he wasn't, explaining that out of the four heroes, he was probably the one most obsessed with not dying. It clicked for her that he was dead serious, and she confessed that maybe she was the one who had been underestimating him all along. He whipped around, completely dumbfounded, and she laid into him, saying he was in a much better situation than she ever was, yet he still refused to give it his all. He needed to cook up a new plan. The truth was, for the time being, he wanted to lie low here and scoop up all the intel he could. The next day at the training grounds, he was debating whether to finally show off the real power of his blessing just to keep from getting the boot. The only problem was, they weren't heading into any dungeons yet, and out in the broad daylight, he was basically useless. Once training was over for the day, our guy figured his best bet was to have a little chat with the commander. He flagged her down, hoping she could convince the queen not to kick him out. But the scene immediately cuts to her, flat out telling him that was going to be a tough sell. He pushed back, asking if she really thought his ability was worthless. He knew it looked like he was slacking off during training, but he insisted he was trying. Before he could make his case, though, the commander cut him off, saying that, actually, she didn't think his ability was useless in the slightest. In fact, she even wanted to recruit him for her night brigade. This threw him for a loop, but she explained that his unique skills were incredibly valuable for the dungeons they raided. The second his aura flared up, she noticed something weird. He felt way more powerful than he did just a moment ago. He just casually thanked her for being straight with him and said that since his cover was about to be blown, but if he decided to serve the kingdom as a regular soldier instead of one of its weakest heroes, that would give them all the reason they needed to not exile him. Our protagonist took a moment to weigh his options. He knew joining this country's knights meant being trapped in this nation. This wasn't a decision he could just jump into. So, he told her he appreciated the offer but needed some time to mull it over. She said that was perfectly fine and told him that if he ever needed someone, he knew who to talk to. Our boy, being blunt, asked if she meant he should come find her after he inevitably got kicked out. She just glanced out the window and replied with a cryptic, maybe. A few days went by. Our guy was passed out at his desk, vaguely wondering if the rumors about visitors from the neighboring kingdom were true. She confirmed it, explaining that yes, they were coming for a huge celebration and tons of guests had been invited. That meant no classes and no training for the day. Our boy was completely drained, groaning about why nobody bothered to warn him about this upcoming fiasco. But she just shot back that students who nap in class don't earn the right to be in the loop. It dawned on him that, yeah, even this woman wasn't his biggest fan. A little while later, the Lemon Cavalry made their grand entrance into the city. The whole town was celebrating with fireworks, and all our boy could think was, for a country that's totally broke, they're sure blowing a lot of cash on this party. He debated crashing the celebration, figuring no one would even notice him. Then again, showing up and having to explain who he was sounded like a total nightmare. They might even get curious and start digging into why 4 heroes were summoned in the first place. That would be a massive headache, so he scrapped that idea. But just because he wasn't going didn't mean he couldn't spy. He fired up his 2.0 eye and his consciousness started drifting through the castle halls. He spotted the 2 princesses and had to admit, his teacher looked absolutely killer in her new dress. But, as always, her smile looked totally forced. Then he saw the mountains of fancy food on the tables and instantly knew Nala had been feeding him a line. Earlier, while he was talking with her, he figured out that one of the big reasons this kingdom was going broke was because of these ridiculously over-the-top parties. It seemed the queen was obsessed with keeping up appearances of splendor and luxury, totally emptying the royal coffers. And that's when things took an unexpected turn. He spotted a crew standing with Ryu and instantly pegged them as the other heroes summoned from a different country. One guy in particular, a blondie, really stood out. Seriously, you'd never guess he was Japanese. So, he fired up his identification skill and got a name, Masayoshi Date. He figured that was a pretty textbook hero name, but the real question was why this dude was yelling at Ryu. Time to do some lip reading to get the scoop. Turns out, the blonde dude was screaming Takafuji's name, demanding he be brought out right now for a duel. Damn, this story was hitting the fast-forward button. The party wrapped up in a flash, and next thing you know, Aya's announcing Takafuji's grand entrance. Every hero in the place swiveled their heads, and our boy knew there was no dodging this bullet. Masayoshi then strode forward and officially threw down the gauntlet. The whole room went dead silent, everyone hanging on his every word. And our boy, lazy as always, just casually asked why it had to be a duel. Mister. Masayoshi shot back that it was to prove to the goddess that Takafuji wasn't worthy of her affection. Takafuji was a little thrown off, but the blondie just told him to cut the act. Masayoshi then laid it all out, saying he knew for a fact that Takafuji had been in that white space and met the goddess who summoned them. Our protagonist just shrugged and said, so what? I mean, everyone went through that, right? But then Masayoshi dropped the bombshell. He had proposed to the goddess and she told him that if he could defeat Takafuji Nori, she'd think about it. And in that instant, our boy realized that damn goddess wasn't just trying to offload her problems onto him. She was actively trying to get him out of the picture. Oh, he was definitely going to make her regret this the next time they met. Meanwhile, the other heroes were just looking at each other, totally clueless about all this white space and goddess talk. That's when it clicked for Takafuji. They must have been summoned differently because they didn't have a clue what was going on. Explaining the whole thing would be a massive headache. So for now, he decided to just play dumb. He looked the guy straight in the eye and said he had no idea what he was talking about, but he'd accept the duel anyway. The blondie smirked, and our boy pointed out they still needed to set the terms, because if it was a one-on-one fight, that would be way too easy for Masayoshi. After all, unlike the other heroes, he didn't have a superpowered body or a class built for fighting. Surely, this guy didn't go to all this trouble just to pick on someone with every disadvantage imaginable, because if that was the case, that would be just plain pathetic. Masayoshi yelled back, of course not, and swore he'd accept any kind of duel Takafuji proposed. The crowd couldn't believe he'd agree to something so ridiculous, so our boy brought up a dungeon where he was scheduled to train with the knights. He proposed a race. First one to kill the boss on the first floor wins. Surely, this guy didn't go to all this trouble just to pick on someone with every disadvantage imaginable, because if that was the case, there was no way he could actually kill the boss. Our boy just smirked, though, and said he had a little plan up his sleeve. Masayoshi was all for it, calling it a great idea and accepting the challenge. But Ryu pulled our boy aside, warning him that even if he could navigate the dungeon easily, the duel was set for the next day, and right after it was over, the queen summoned Takafuji Nori. She demanded to know why he accepted a duel just to get completely steamrolled. Meanwhile, our boy had just used his detection skill to sneak past everything. The final score was clear. He had been absolutely demolished in this duel. The queen went on, saying she'd been turning a blind eye to how lazy and weak he was. She'd only given him a chance because the knight commander saw some potential in him. But with this performance, he had brought shame upon the kingdom, and that was something she couldn't forgive. Aya could already see where this was going. And sure enough, the queen declared Takafuji Nori banished from the kingdom. The first princess looked pretty happy about it, while the other two princesses looked a little sad. But the person with the biggest, happiest grin on their face? Our boy. That schemer definitely planned for this to happen. The queen then asked if he had any objections, and he said, as a matter of fact, I do. He wanted to know exactly how he'd brought harm to the kingdom. She shot back that it was obvious. By losing the duel, he had tarnished the kingdom's reputation. But he'd accept the duel anyway. The blondie smirked, and our boy pointed out they still needed to set the terms, because if it was a one-on-one fight. And sure enough, the queen declared Takafuji Nori banished from the kingdom. The first princess looked pretty happy about it. On top of that, he wasn't even recognized as a hero in this kingdom, and his very existence was kept secret from other nations. With absolutely no power and no influence, and with nobody knowing who he was, there was no chance he could have brought any shame to the kingdom. After all, the duel was just a goofy little game. However, he'd used his trip into that dungeon to put his detection skill to good use. A couple of guys tossed a bag of money his way, and he played it off like he'd just found a small reward. The queen and princess were pretty impressed, and he offered the small treasure to Her Majesty. She seemed quite pleased, while our guy just casually mentioned it was a piece of cake to find with his ability. The real story, though, was that Takafuji wasn't ready to leave the castle just yet, so he cleverly used those coins to buy himself some more time there. That way, he managed to get the queen and Masayoshi off his back for a while. And just like that, he was back to his nightly routine of hunting and peacefully grinding for levels. As long as his power-ups stayed under the radar, everything was cool. The only annoying part was that he was getting seriously tired of chugging down that bird's blood. He took a look around and realized he'd somehow ended up right back where he started his hunt for the night. This force was totally messing with his internal compass, and he wondered if there was another way to use his detection. He fired up his demon vision along with detection and immediately spotted a barrier leading to a whole new area. It was some kind of illusion designed to make people unknowingly wander in circles. But with his special eyes, he could see right through the trick, and couldn't help but wonder if stronger monsters were lurking on the other side. He figured he could always just teleport away if things got too hairy, so he stepped right through. And what did he find hiding inside? A massive wolf and its entire pack. The moment he set foot inside, he caught some movement nearby. A few wolves were already closing in on him. This was his first time facing down creatures so big they didn't even fit in his field of view, so he instantly activated his trap web. A whole network of traps sprang up around him, and in just a few seconds, the wolves were all down for the count on the ground. If he had been forced to face more than 3 of them at once, it would have been a real struggle. Luckily, the traps were super simple to set up, and the beasts walked right into them. He started absorbing the bodies into the void, muttering that at least these guys gave way more experience points than the birds did. A little while later, he found himself deeper in the forest. There, in the middle of a lake, stood a single tree, perfectly illuminated by the moonlight. Our hero couldn't help but think it looked exactly like the perfect arena for a boss battle. The very second he turned around and said, "But this isn't a video game," the boss was already behind him. Man, before he could even blink, his arm was just gone. What the heck? He was still looking off to the side when the monster took a swipe, sending him flying backward right into a tree. He was still trying to process what had just happened when the creature was suddenly inches from his face. It was a mythical beast known as a Fenrir. He quickly figured out this thing wasn't a demon, but something else entirely. He guessed it might be some kind of mini-boss, seeing as he wasn't instantly turned into a puddle on the floor. He knew he could still escape using his shadow teleport, but that was going to be tricky given how unbelievably fast this thing was. But he didn't have much time to think. The Fenrir was already lunging forward, its jaws wide open for the finishing blow. The monster obliterated the tree, but our hero was already gone. He'd already zipped to the top of another tree and taken off into the air with one of his wings. As he did, he recalled the world where he'd first gotten his vampire powers, thinking to himself, "I really didn't expect to have to use this so soon." The Fenrir looked up at him and demanded to know why he was there. The fact that it could talk was a dead giveaway that this was no ordinary beast. Our guy played dumb, claiming he just got lost in the woods, but the wolf immediately called his bluff, pointing out that he'd obviously passed through the illusionary barrier on purpose. Takafuji finally came clean and admitted his curiosity got the better of him. He explained that illusions are usually set up to protect something important, and he was dying to know what it was. The Fenrir, however, wasn't having any of it and declared that the conversation was over. He had trespassed and taken out some of its pack, so there was no way he was walking out of there in one piece. But Takafuji just cracked a smirk, saying that the more the wolf yapped, the more certain he became that something precious was hidden here. Now, he was absolutely determined to find out what was so important. The wolf declared that, as a final parting gift, he'd reveal a secret. This very land was where his kind had made a pact with a witch. He admitted he didn't know the reason, but ever since that pact, they'd been charged with protecting this place. His sole mission was to wipe out any invading monsters or threats. And, of course, that made an intruder like Takafuji a prime target. The wolf then offered a cold comfort. If the kid just stood still, he'd at least make it quick and painless. Takafuji, however, was a little preoccupied, marveling at the fact that his arm had already grown back. Turns out, his vampire regeneration was way crazier than he'd ever imagined. Fener readied his attack, snarling that it was obvious Takafuji was no ordinary human, and then lunged forward with incredible speed. He roared that there was no way he was letting him leave this place alive. Takafuji scrambled to dodge as the ground erupted where he'd just been standing. Only thanks to his demon eye could he barely track the wolf's lightning-fast movements. Realizing he stood zero chance of winning this fight head-on, Takafuji tried to make a break for it by flying. The plan was to get some air and create some distance, then hit the ground and teleport the heck out of there. But while he was in midair, the creature unleashed a deadly barrage of ice shards. Takafuji threw his arms up to shield himself, but the attack missed, slicing a massive tree clean in two. The wolf just glanced at him for a split second, and then, in the blink of an eye, it was already on him, lunging for another bite. Another shockwave of force erupted as he dove to the side just in time. The beast was so ridiculously fast he had no opening to even attempt hypnosis, and finding an escape route was looking more and more impossible. Spotting a waterfall up ahead, he desperately wondered how the hell he was going to survive this. The wolf dove from above, blasting another ice attack while opening its jaws for the kill. Our boy braced for impact, but this time his wings got completely shredded in the assault. Fener let out a victorious grin and closed in for the final blow, but Takafuji just grinned right back, activating an ability on the ground below and sending a forest of sharp spikes shooting upwards. Fener barely twisted out of the way, narrowly avoiding being impaled. Turns out, Takafuji had been stashing those leftover tree trunks in his dimensional storage for just such an emergency. The only problem was, this trick hadn't really made the situation any less deadly. As Fener locked its gaze on him, Takafuji frantically searched for an opening to cast his teleportation. His best bet was to use hypnosis, just to distract the beast for a split second. So, he started weaving dark magic again, muttering to himself that he just needed to buy a little time. He whipped out a handful of daggers as the wolf braced to counter, knowing he had to create an opening, no matter how small. He flared his aura, making the wolf pause and wonder what this kid was planning now. Our hero knew this creature was on another level. He'd almost had his back ripped open by just one bite. Then, at the last possible second, he summoned more knives and flung them straight at Fener's head. The wolf scoffed internally, thinking it was a completely pointless move, an attack that sloppy would never work on a being like him. It casually swiped its tail, creating an ice barrier, but our boy managed to block with his knives. Hey, at least with his regeneration, he could keep fighting as long as he protected his head and legs. Meanwhile, Fener was actually starting to get impressed by how ridiculously persistent this kid was. That's when our boy sprang his trap, activating a web of black threads. The surrounding trees had already been marked, and suddenly the wolf was tangled in the bindings. For the first time, Fener actually seemed to be trapped. Takafuji allowed himself a quick smirk, but that victory lasted all of 2 seconds before every single tree just shattered into splinters. The wolf just calmly stated that a trick like that wouldn't even leave a scratch. Absolutely stunned and terrified, Takafuji went right back to scrambling for his life. Dodging yet another ice attack as the wolf lunged in for a bite, he realized he had only one option left. Praying to every god he knew that this would work, he kicked off a nearby tree, launching himself skyward in a slick parkour move. The wolf assumed he was just trying to fly away again. What an idiot, it thought, and sent another powerful tail attack after him, declaring that the boy had just made himself an easy target in the open sky. But here's the thing. The whole time he was running, Takafuji had been secretly laying out threads with his other eye, and now, the entire battlefield he'd just covered had become one massive teleportation circle. He activated it, a grin spreading across his face as he said, "Now there's nowhere for you to run." The wolf looked up, realizing the kid had vanished from the sky, and wondered where he'd gone. But it was too late. Takafuji was already on its back, whispering, "Plan worked perfectly. Time to say goodnight, pal." And with that, he plunged his blade straight into the wolf's eye. The beast let out a howl of pure agony as Takafuji casually remarked that getting his butt kicked first was all part of his signature move. But the mythical beast went berserk, its tail whipping around and destroying everything in sight. One of those devastating swings almost clipped our hero, but since the creature was now blind, evading its attacks became a whole lot simpler. He initially thought he'd only managed to blind one of its eyes. But nope, our guy was way faster than that. He'd sliced through both of them. The monster was now totally blind, but it suddenly went still, and that's when Takafuji figured it out. It was trying to sniff him out. The sheer killing intent pouring off the creature was bone-chilling. It lunged forward again, ready to chomp down, but our boy just casually quipped, "Yep, I think that's my cue to leave." With its attacks now sluggish, teleporting away was a piece of cake. The wolf was left fuming, wondering where the hell that little punk disappeared to. After a few quick spatial jumps, Takafuji practically crash-landed onto his bed, totally drained. After going through all that trouble, all he'd managed was to barely scratch the beast. But he swore next time would be different. He was going to win. Starting that very day, he began sneaking into the castle's armory, stockpiling top-tier materials and metals, just in case he ever ran into another crazy situation like that one. And during the brawl, Takafuji had managed to snag a few tufts of Fenrir's fur. This fur had some wild properties. It could crystallize and harden on command. The moment he channeled a little dark magic into it, it became solid as a rock. That's why every one of the monster's attacks packed such an energetic punch. He realized this stuff reacted to human contact, which got him thinking. What would happen if he forged a weapon out of it? He was going to win. Starting that very day, he began sneaking into the castle's armory, stockpiling top-tier materials and metals. For his plan, this was absolutely perfect. Not even Fenrir itself would be able to tear through this stuff. Takafuji practically crash-landed onto his bed, totally drained. After going through all that trouble, all he'd managed was to barely scratch the beast. But he swore next time would be different. So, he ended up crafting a special kind of thread he named Gleipnir. These things were basically unbreakable. No amount of force could snap them, and they'd instantly harden and crystallize when infused with magic. Since Fenrir had swiped at him so many times, he'd actually collected a decent amount of fur, which sparked another brilliant idea. The very next day, Takafuji materialized cool as a cucumber, saying, "Hey, it's been a whole day since we last met." Fenrir was absolutely livid. That damn pest actually had the nerve to show his face in its territory again. The beast was still blind, and Takafuji couldn't resist mocking it, commenting on how lovely its eyes were. The creature instantly roared for him to shut his mouth. Our guy was actually impressed. Even without its sight, Fenrir's aim was spot on. The wolf growled a warning that no one had ever set foot in its domain twice and lived to tell the tale. Takafuji noted that between the blinding rage and the pain from its eyes, this thing was one stubborn beast. But that fur was just too good, obviously. He had to put it down and loot the rest. Fenrir continued its relentless assault until Takafuji casually touched a nearby tree. Suddenly, from within the wood itself, several shadowy wolves burst out. The giant beast was completely caught off guard as it was swarmed and bitten from all directions. Takafuji nonchalantly pointed out that based on scent alone, Fenrir should already know exactly what they were. It was being mauled by the reanimated corpses of its own pack. The monster howled in pure fury, demanding to know how Takafuji could dare to commit such an atrocity. But our hero just shrugged, saying they looked useful, so he decided to make them his minions. Fenrir thrashed wildly, shaking the corpse wolves off and sending a few of them soaring through the air, with one of its attacks nearly catching Takafuji. The protagonist's zombie wolf attack wasn't really doing damage, but it was a great distraction. Still, the giant wolf managed to land a powerful swipe in his direction. He teleported out of the way just in the nick of time as the corpse wolves swarmed the trees. The moment he reappeared behind a trunk to catch his breath, Fenrir was already on him, lunging for the kill. Another quick teleport saved his skin. The monster was getting seriously ticked off by this game of tag, just as Takafuji reappeared high above it and the beast coiled, ready to leap up for the final blow. That's when Takafuji broke into a grin and said, "Who said I was trying to run away?" The creature shot forward only to slam hard into a web of invisible threads, getting tangled up in an instant. Fenrir was stunned. Even with its powerful sense of smell, it hadn't detected a thing. As Takafuji floated down, the wolf roared, demanding to know what the hell that little rat had done. And so, our hero explained, "These threads? I made them from your own fur. That's why you couldn't smell them. They have your exact scent." Turns out, from the moment he'd arrived, it turned out every hit he took, every wolf he unleashed, was all just a smokescreen. While the beast was distracted, he'd been weaving the perfect trap this whole time. Now that Fenrir was completely tangled up, he was dead in the water. Takafuji gave him a final nod and triggered the thread's compression, causing the lines to cinch tight, yanking the massive beast down to the dirt. The other wolves just watched, completely silent. Fen couldn't believe it was this really how it ended. He knew if he died, the pack would shatter right along with him. But buddy, it was way too late for regrets. Takuji didn't just take him out. He'd already chugged his blood. That one kill alone shot him up 5 whole levels and snagged him some sweet new abilities. That's when a pop-up in the system caught his eye a unique skill called Bastard King. Then, he heard someone call him Master. When he spun around, it was the very wolves he had just taken down. They were standing right there, and somehow they could talk, which he figured had to be because of his new ability. He started wondering if this skill worked on any subordinate. That's when one of the wolves piped up, "Hey, why don't you make Fen your subordinate too?" Turns out, their old boss was a creature who fought tooth and nail to protect this land and always had their backs. That's why these former servants of Fen now wanted to follow Takuji as an ally. Takuji let out a long sigh. It's not like there was a downside to agreeing. The real problem was he was completely gassed and running on fumes. Meanwhile, back at the castle, dinner was in full swing, and Ryu was casually pointing out that the first and second princesses didn't exactly seem like best buds. Tamaki shot that down, saying it wasn't a beef, they just had clashing personalities. Aoi wasn't so sure and wanted to dig into it more. As for Takuji, he couldn't have cared less. He was too busy being ticked off that his food was always loaded with garlic. And that's when Ryu suddenly volunteered him to play mediator. Our boy was like, "Whoa, why are you dragging me into this?" He figured Elro and Tamaki could handle it. They're girls, they can go talk to the princesses. But Ryu wouldn't let it go. He argued that Takuji had classes with the second princess and was on better terms with her, so he might have a better shot at getting the two sisters to patch things up. Takafuji just shot back that the first princess was stubborn as a mule and that trying to broker peace between them was a lost cause. But Ryu told him not to sweat it. Just ask, Ryu said, and she'll listen. Our boy was clueless as to why, until Ryu dropped the bomb. It's because she's totally head over heels for him. Seeing the girls' faces, our boy knew Ryu's reputation as a smooth operator was taking a nosedive. Then Ryu sweetened the pot, adding that if he took the job, he could ask for 1 free day a week. And since our guy absolutely despised daytime training, he caved immediately. The only catch, he had to talk to the first princess first, so he found himself knocking on her door. She was already there, arms crossed, making it crystal clear she was only giving him the time of day because Ryu had asked, so he'd better make it quick. The second he stepped inside, he was already regretting his life choices. Before he could even get a word out, she announced that for today, and today only, she would grant him the privilege of speaking to her directly. He should of course be eternally grateful for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He completely tuned her out and started checking out how ridiculously fancy her room was. Seeing him looking around, she got a smug look, assuming he was just blown away by all her wealth, riches. She figured that a peasant like him could only dream of. That's when he pointed to a little duck figurine and asked if she was actually into that kind of thing. Amanda just scoffed and called him an idiot. She was royalty, for crying out loud. Everything in here was a gift from either her mother or other noble families. Our guy just wanted to phase through the floor at this point and decided to rip the band-aid off. He finally brought up her relationship with her sister, the second princess. Amanda shut him down instantly, claiming she'd never given a single thought to her. Takafuji knew right then he'd made a terrible mistake taking this stupid deal. He was so over the drama, so he just laid it out flat. Ryu asked him to help the two of them talk more. But Amanda shot back that she had zero interest in that. He really didn't get why, and she told him that as a commoner, he had no business sticking his nose in their affairs. He just rubbed his face, totally fed up. Looked like he was going to have to play dirty. So he brought up Ryu again, mentioning how disappointed he'd be if this whole thing fell through. And just like that, her whole attitude changed. She was suddenly all ears, asking him to lay out the entire plan. Guess she was childish enough for that little tactic to work perfectly. A little while later, Amanda revealed that things weren't always so frosty between them. Back when they were kids, they were practically inseparable. Aaliyah was the brilliant older sister, always up for a game, which is why Amanda loved tagging along. But then, one day, out of the blue, Aaliyah started pulling away. Not long after, Amanda turned 7 and was officially named the first princess, making her the heir to the throne. That's when the bombshell dropped. Aaliyah wasn't her full sister. They didn't even share the same mother. From that moment on, everything went downhill, creating the tense relationship they have now. The thing is, to become queen, Amanda had to go through some seriously intense training. And it was during that brutal training that she finally understood how amazing and genuinely kind Arya had always been, and she started wishing Arya was still with her. But the adults in the palace made sure that never happened, and the gap between them just got wider. Turning away, she finished, saying that was all there was to it. Finally, it all clicked for Takafuji. Her whole stuck-up attitude wasn't her fault. It was a product of her upbringing. Just like her room, nothing in it was actually her. Everything she owned, even parts of her personality, had been handpicked by other people. Acting all high and mighty was just her only way of showing a shred of individuality. With that, Amanda just flopped onto her desk and demanded that since she'd spilled her guts, it was his turn to give her some advice. Takafuji's advice was simple. Go to Aaliyah and say, "From now on, you're my big sister." But Amanda shot that down, whining that all the maids would start flapping their gums. He just laughed, asking since when were the maids more important than the princess. It was pretty ridiculous that the future queen couldn't even decide what to call her own sister. Amanda tried to argue it would just cause trouble for Aaliyah, but he countered that Aaliyah wasn't the fragile doll she was making her out to be. She paused for a beat, then finally agreed to think about it and mumbled a thank you. Without another word, he just bounced. A little while later, he filled Nala in on the whole conversation. The maid listened, looking less than thrilled, but still promised she'd pass the message along. He figured this was the best route, since Nala was tight with the second princess. The very next morning, Nala found him, saying she had a message from the second princess. When he asked what was up, she told him Arya had summoned him for a special training session. Poor Takafuji's trouble senses were tingling. And sure enough, there he was, stuck trailing the two princesses through the middle of a crowded street. He couldn't help but wonder why they had to drag him all the way out here for a lesson. Aaliyah explained that experiencing the city's vibe was a crucial part of her social studies, which is why, she declared, he'd be joining her at a shop. He asked what they were shopping for, and she nonchalantly suggested they browse some accessories. Once they were inside, he was totally baffled as to why a princess would be doing her own shopping for trinkets. She was completely absorbed, then turned to him asking which one he liked better. Not giving it a second thought, he just mumbled that both were fine, earning him a sharp focus from Arya. Turns out, the gift wasn't even for her, which just confused him more. Nala had to explain that it was a birthday present for the first princess. Apparently, after Nala's message, Arya had decided they would go out and buy a gift for her newfound sister. He got that part, but was still confused about why his opinion mattered. Arya reasoned that since he'd been in Amanda's room and had that long heart-to-heart, he must know more about her taste than she did. He clarified, however, that Amanda's room was filled with gifts others had chosen, so literally anything would be fine. The second princess then asked if he was saying gifts were pointless, but he corrected her, saying a gift's real value comes from the person giving it. That's why, he insisted, whatever Arya picked would be more than enough. Nala was touched, thinking he was being incredibly thoughtful. The reality? He was just spitting out the quickest answers so he could finally go home and crash. Still, the second princess lit up and immediately went to purchase the gift. The maid praised Takafuji, saying this was all thanks to him. And seeing Arya smile, she added that it was wonderful to see her genuinely happy again. Arya turned, asking what they were whispering about, and Nala quickly changed the subject. And just like that, 5 days went by. Well, at least they scored an invite to the first princess's birthday bash, a place crawling with high-profile guests and overflowing with insanely expensive food. Everyone was just standing around looking like poorly drawn background characters, as he put it, while our boy scanned the entire scene with his demon eye. As usual, he was eavesdropping on conversations for Arya, all while wondering where the second princess had gotten to. Then, he spotted her hiding behind a pillar. She looked incredibly nervous about approaching her younger sister, which was understandable since Amanda was talking with Ryu, making it super awkward to just jump in. He decided to play the clueless wingman and give her a little push, suddenly materializing beside Arya, which made her jump and ask what he was even doing there. Takafuji shot back that she kicked him last time, so they were even. He then taunted her, asking where all that courage went, before giving her a firm shove forward. She stumbled right into Amanda, drawing a sea of confused stares from the nobles, while our boy silently prayed this wouldn't turn into a complete disaster. Having gone this far, the only thing left was to hand over the gift. Arya took a deep breath and presented the gift box to Amanda. Amanda paused for a beat before opening the box to see what was inside. She then declared she wanted to wear it right away, and Arya helped fasten it in her hair. She turned to ask how she looked, and Arya told her it suited her perfectly. Amanda smiled, and for a moment, the party went on as normal, right before Amanda said she wanted another present. She wanted Arya to start calling her big sister again. The request caught Arya completely off guard, triggering a flood of memories from their childhood. Having gone this far, the only thing left was to hand over the gift. Arya took a deep breath and presented the gift box to Amanda. She turned to ask how she looked, and Arya told her it suited her perfectly. Amanda smiled, and for a moment, the party went on as normal, right before Amanda said she wanted another present. She then replied that she would be happy to. Amanda looked surprised for a moment, and they shared an emotional hug while Takafuji just stood by, thinking, well, at least that's one problem solved, so he'd better be getting a fantastic reward. Ryu chuckled and said he'd try to find something worthwhile, but as he looked at the two princesses, he was genuinely glad it had all worked out. Takafuji, on the other hand, just thought to himself that this guy really had to play the perfect hero all the time. He then said his goodbyes, stating that he was going to get some fresh air. The moment he stepped outside, Arya approached to thank him, and our boy just told her not to sweat it. Ryu told our boy that having him handle the situation was a brilliant idea, to which our protagonist replied that he'd worked pretty hard to make it happen. Takafuji then teased her, asking if she felt better now that she was finally expressing her emotions. She shot back that if anyone was emotionally constipated, it was him. But suddenly, with no one around to overhear them, Arya smiled, remarking that his detection ability really made things a lot easier. A scream echoed through the hall, and both of them snapped their heads toward the sound. Arya was about to rush in, but he blocked her path and ordered her to stay put. A head went flying through the air, the king and queen were gone. What in the world just happened? A man bellowed, ordering the corrupt to be silent. Utter carnage erupted on the ballroom floor. Everyone was frozen in shock, and our boy realized that after this, no one would ever dare call Arya the doll princess again. That was why he, a man named Videre who possessed royal blood, would now claim the throne, and the woman named Ayana would be the new queen. Man, it was the commander the guy who had been training our boy this whole time. Now things were getting seriously complicated. The two stood there, stunned, as poor Amanda stumbled toward what was left of her mother. She started channeling her power, screaming that they were insane as she formed a sphere of light. But girl, this was not a good idea. In a blink, Ayana was on her and cut her down. She didn't end her, but damn, you almost had to feel bad for the girl. At least Ayana looked cool as that so-called royal hit the floor. Amanda writhed in pain, and the gift box she'd just been given went rolling across the ground. The heroes were in total shock, and Ayana warned Ryu not to move a muscle, making it clear that if he tried anything, his end would not be a pleasant one. That's when Vitire yelled that they were just children and pawns of the witches who had betrayed the witch's will by foolishly deciding to summon heroes. That was a sin so severe, only death could pay for it. And man, just as poor Amanda was screaming for her sister, Ayanna cut her down without a second thought. What in the world, Ayanna? This commander was a total plot twist. Everything got turned upside down. The one I used to hate, I'm now rooting for, and the one I liked is now public enemy number one. Aaliyah was about to do something reckless, and our guy knew it was a terrible idea. She was just about to scream for her sister when he clamped a hand over her mouth, warning her that getting caught right now would be the absolute dumbest thing they could do. A full-blown rebellion was the last thing he ever saw coming. Then, Vide ordered the citizens and soldiers to deal with anyone who dared stand against the witches. One of the nobles tried to speak up, but he was cut down from behind before he could even finish his sentence. The scumbag actually looked up at the sky and smiled, declaring he had finally purified the entire royal family. From now on, anyone who opposes the witches will face a death sentence. Takafuji kept whispering urgently for Aaliyah to get a grip, warning her that if she didn't, she'd be the next one to die. She had two choices: do something reckless and get killed on the spot, or they could try to escape together. Meanwhile, the second Amanda fell, Ryu rushed to her side, shouting that this was completely insane and no one deserved to die for such a pointless reason. But Vide just calmly replied that the heroes were still far too naive. He claimed that every single noble present didn't deserve to be alive. He said they had no clue about the real state of the country. Ryu screamed back that even if that was true, they didn't have to slaughter them. But Vide just retorted that if Ryu had seen the horrors of the city, he would totally get it. He then ordered Ayanna to capture the heroes. She flared her aura, looking as stunning as always, but deadlier than ever before, and told Ryu it would be best if he just came quietly. But man, Ryu's got a few screws loose. He activated his limit break blessing and fired a slash of light right at her. Ayanna hardly even flinched. She just casually raised her sword and blocked it like it was nothing. She even had the nerve to compliment him, saying his power and judgment weren't half bad. Not giving up, Ryu lunged forward again, unleashing a flurry of slashes. But seeing how calmly Ayanna dealt with it all, it was obvious the kid had absolutely zero chance. His attacks were tearing the hall to pieces, forcing Elway to throw up a barrier to block a storm of deflected sword strikes. Tamaki insisted they had to grab Ryu and get out of there, like, right now. The only problem was, they were completely surrounded by soldiers. This was not going to be an easy out. Ayanna was still perfectly composed while Ryu was already breathing heavy. She even commented that with Tamaki not even bothering to jump in, this win was going to be a piece of cake. Ryu barely managed to block another strike before she got right in his face and asked, "So what's the plan? You can keep fighting, but you can't win. It'd be better to just surrender and let us capture you all." Then she threatened to finish off the second princess right then and there. Aaliyah was just collapsed on the floor as our guy gave her a blunt warning. "We have to leave. Now. If you stay here, you are going to die. You get that?" She hesitated for a moment, but he pressed her, asking if she was seriously going to give up again after everything that's happened. It clicked for Aaliyah. He was talking about her sister, about how she'd abandoned her before, and right then, she made up her mind. She wasn't giving up. She was going to survive, so one day she could get her revenge. She refused to let Ayanna be the one to decide her fate. He cracked a smile and said if that was her decision, he'd help her escape. But from this point on, he wasn't calling her second princess anymore. He was just going to call her Aaliyah. Just then, Ryu's sword shattered into a million pieces. He finally realized he stood no chance, and Ayanna declared, "This is the end for you." She drove the sharp heel of her boot right into his stomach. Oof, that one had to hurt. The poor guy coughed up what looked like last week's lunch, and Tamaki knew instantly this fight was over. He was completely out for the count, and she realized every second they wasted here just made things more dangerous. She decided she had to rescue Ryu right away. But in a flash, Ayanna shattered Elway's barrier with a single blow. Both Tamaki and Elway were left completely stunned, but the commander simply gave the order to capture all of them. Man, the soldiers swarmed in, slamming both girls to the ground. I guess they should be grateful they didn't just get their heads lopped off. Then she ordered them all to be hauled off to prison, and just to pour salt on the wound, Ayanna gave Ryu one last, disappointed look and wondered aloud if all the time she'd spent training him had been a complete waste. As Aaliyah watched the whole mess go down, one thought crossed her mind. At least she wouldn't have to try and escape this nightmare all by herself. But hey, she wasn't by herself. She had our main guy with her. Using his detection skill, he found the perfect hallway for them to sneak through, letting them slip right by the guards completely unnoticed. As they were booking it, Aaliyah was blown away by how far he could sense people, and he turned to ask her if she knew how to use magic. She replied that she only knew the fundamentals. Takafuji then pointed down the hall and warned her that in 10 seconds, a trio of soldiers would show up. He told her she needed to deal with them. She hesitated for a moment, asking if they could just sneak past, but he shot that idea down, saying it wasn't possible. She took a deep breath, gave him a nod, and he kept counting down. 2 seconds. A sword materialized. 1 second, and she unleashed a blast of wind. 3 orbs of air instantly formed around the soldiers' heads, cutting off their air supply and making them drop like sacks of potatoes. Takafuji was seriously impressed. It was no wonder she was supposed to be his teacher. Arya explained that casting magic is a lot easier when you actually have time to prep. But then she noticed he looked drained and asked if he was holding up okay. Our boy just shot back that unfortunately, their enemies couldn't care less how he was feeling. Then he took off running again, saying they needed to press their advantage while security was thin. He'd managed to handle the soldiers, but he knew he stood zero chance against Ayana. The #1 rule of this escape was to stay off her radar. That woman was just in a whole other league. They ducked into an empty room, and he quickly confirmed it was clear. As he scouted for a way out, he turned and asked her if she was handling all of this okay. He had to ask because, man, the palace maids had been completely slaughtered. He was just horrified that they'd gone so far as to murder every last servant. Arya walked over to the corner and called out for Nala. Man, the poor girl. She didn't deserve to go out like that. She held her close, and our hero instantly remembered what Nala had said before, that just seeing the princess smile was enough to make her happy. He was speechless for a moment. After a moment, Arya gently laid Nala down and thanked him for waiting. He just said it worked out, since he needed a minute to recover anyway. But the real question remained, how in the world were they going to get out of there? Meanwhile, the 3 heroes were already locked up, and Ayana explained she'd placed a seal on the prison that was impossible to break from the inside. So, she told them they'd better just sit tight. Tamaki shot back that if the cell was so secure, she should take off their handcuffs. And she had a point. But then Ryu pointed out that there was no way the heroes' alliance would just stand by while they were imprisoned. They were clearly being set up as hostages, and the handcuffs were to stop them from checking out early. Ayana actually gave him some props, saying that for a hothead, he was surprisingly sharp. But Ryu already had his aura flaring, and man, he was absolutely furious. Even the girls were shaken by the sheer killing intent pouring off him. The commander recognized that look on his face, thinking back to her own days on the battlefield. She'd seen that expression 1,000 times, the face of someone enraged by their own powerlessness. It was the same look she used to have. She stared hard at Ryu, her own anger rising. Then, she turned away, muttering that he was still too young. She said he wouldn't last long if he couldn't get a grip on those emotions. If he'd just kept his cool earlier, he might have at least saved Tamaki or Awe. But now, all 3 of them were trapped. And with that, she walked out, leaving them sitting there like a bunch of idiots. Ryu clenched his fists, absolutely seething that the woman still had the nerve to act like some all-knowing mentor, even now. As they headed up the stairs, she couldn't believe they still hadn't been caught. Takafuji was handling the escape way better than she'd expected. After a moment's thought, he agreed it was worth a shot and asked if the rest of the royal family knew about this route. Of course, she replied. It's a secret passage for royalty. She admitted she wasn't even sure if it would work, but told him they didn't have any other options. And that was that. Arya glanced back and whispered an apology to Nala, who now looked like she was just sleeping. Tragically, the princess had been too weak to save her. All she could do now was thank the loyal maid for everything she had done. It was a truly heart-wrenching moment. Meanwhile, the army continued its sweep through the castle, hunting for the 2 of them. Takafuji knew they had to make this one chance count. The only problem was, with it being a royal escape route, it wasn't a stretch to think their enemies would figure she'd try to use it. Takafuji's spirits sank. It felt like they were out of options, with nothing he could do to get them out of this mess. He quickly tells her to hold up, warning her they're walking straight into a trap, and it's not just a couple of guards. This means their path is totally blocked. And to top it all off, more soldiers are closing in from behind. Retreating is a no-go. Understandably, the poor girl is completely lost. So what's the plan? Is there any way to sneak past? But all he can say is that it's impossible. It looks like the enemy was one step ahead, waiting for them at that secret door, and now the whole area is on lockdown. Olivia realizes they're trapped. Takafuji is certain that if they get caught, it won't be a quick end. They'll be put through the ringer. Getting out of this is going to be next to impossible. He's starting to think this might be a dead end for both of them. Is this where he finally throws in the towel? But she fires back, refusing to give up. There's no way she's just going to roll over and let them take her down. She's determined to fight to the bitter end. Suddenly, her whole demeanor changes, and Takafuji, looking completely stunned, gets this look on his face like a deflated balloon. The little rascal's eyes lit up, seeing that her fighting spirit was far from broken. Suddenly, escape seemed possible again. He tells her he used his detection skill and picked up an enemy army heading right for them. She asks if it's a big one, and he confirms it probably is. He has no idea if they're here to rescue the royals or for some other reason, but a foreign army is definitely on its way. When she asks how long, he figures, probably by sundown. That means they just have to survive for about 15 more minutes, and this whole place is about to erupt into total chaos. The only catch, a fight is unavoidable. She just gives a determined nod, understanding the stakes. Takafuji knows their chances are a coin toss, 50-50 at best. Making it out alive will come down to sheer luck. So, he tells her they'll make a break for the area with the fewest guards and for her to watch their 6. Just then, an enemy spots them and yells that they've found the princess. Without a moment's hesitation, they unleash a volley of arrows, but our girl throws up a magical barrier out of nowhere. She screams at him that they just have to hold on for 15 minutes. She's dead set on surviving this, no matter what. She's completely in the zone, maintaining that magic shield, but even so, arrows are zipping past her arm and barely missing her face. Takafuji yells for her to cut right, and whoa, that was a close call. An arrow actually grazes her hair. The soldiers shout orders to advance and box them in. That's when Takafuji realizes the enemy is moving way faster than he anticipated. He activates his 3D vision and senses another group closing in from the left. He shouts a warning, and she throws up another barrier just in time. The enemies pause for a split second, but it doesn't last. That shield only held up for about 10 seconds. Takafuji is actually impressed they haven't been turned into pincushions yet. The poor girl is clearly exhausted, but they keep pushing forward through the corridors. The sun is beginning to go down, but their luck runs out as they stumble into a dead-end room, a total trap. Her hope starts to fade, and Takafuji can only apologize. No matter where he looked, there were soldiers blocking every path. There was no escape. Just then, more guards pour in, shouting that they've found them and knocking their arrows for another round. Olivia yells for him to take cover as the soldiers argue about whether to charge in. In the end, they decide to just keep raining arrows on them. The big problem is her magic is fading fast, and at this rate, she can't keep blocking for much longer. Another volley flies, and this time her shield is visibly smaller and weaker. She's barely hanging on. Explosions are rocking the room from all sides as the soldiers roar to prepare the next attack. But still, she refuses to back down. Nobody expected her to be this stubborn. She summons another shield as more arrows fly. It's then that she turns to call out for Takafuji, just as the soldiers start cheering, thinking the fight is finally over. But then they realize, hey, wait a second, where's the other one? Olivia is on her last legs. The real issue? She's so focused she hasn't even noticed. Where did Takafuji go? She spins around, calling his name, but there's no reply. And then, the horrible realization dawns on her. Nobody expected her to be this stubborn. She summons another shield as more arrows fly. It's then that she turns to call out for Takafuji, just as the soldiers start cheering, thinking the fight is finally over. But then they realize, hey, wait a second, where's the other one? Olivia is on her last legs. He used her as a decoy to make his own escape. It seems that whole story about reinforcements and getting out together was a total lie, just a way to keep her fighting, not understanding what's happening. The soldiers are confused too. There's some dark energy in the air and are calling to turn on the lights. What is this? She sees the last rays of the setting sun and feels a sudden shift in the air. A figure appears, apologizing for being late. From now on, he says, he'll take it from here. She's absolutely floored. That was brutal. Biting into skulls, ripping through necks. The soldiers are panicking, screaming for help, trying to figure out what's going on. The beast within him is starting to show. He tells Fenra to take care of them. The fools didn't even notice the shadow behind them. And Dan, what just happened? But by then, they've all become dinner. Just those creepy little horror movie hands scurrying off, and the whole hallway soaked in blood and swallowed by darkness. The guy's still freaking out, and our boy calmly warns him. No matter how much you scream, no one's coming and no one's going to hear you. Leah's collapsed on the ground, while the soldier tries to make sense of what's happening. They're calling out for the lieutenant while Takafuji stands there with a smirk. Fina appears behind the soldier, saying only this one's left, but honestly, they were all too weak. The soldier loses it, slamming back against the wall, begging for help. And Takafuji just says, I saw you kill plenty of people. Seems fair that you die as payment, don't you think? Not a very complicated logic, but it's fair. He's just standing there cool as ever. The guy stammers, are you type of Fuji? And all he gets in response is, who knows? Then the wolf sinks its teeth in. Another one down. Man, that hero of ours, she really held on, didn't she? She's lying in a pool of blood now, too. She calls out for him, saying she's using what little magic she has left to try to stop the bleeding. But wow, our guy is ice cold. He says, it's a good call, but goodbye. She's lost too much blood. There's no way she's making it out alive. Then she asks if he's had this power the whole time, and he just tells her not to look at it like that. Yes, he has this power, but he can only use it when the moon is out. That whole reinforcement story obviously fake. He could have survived alone, but he said it just to give her a little hope. Looking at her now, he remembers those eyes. Eyes full of vengeance and determination. Even in that state, she still hadn't given up. And if that was the case, maybe he wanted to see what she was capable of. Wait, what? Out of nowhere, he asks. Are you a virgin? She wants to know how he knows that. Okay, now Ankine is scared about what he's offering. He tells her there's a way for her to survive, but she had to become his servant, his subordinate. By accepting death as a human, she could keep living as something beyond human. The choice was hers. I'm just concerned about the beginning of that offer. As weird as it sounds, she's lying in a pool of blood. She remembers Amanda and the maid and realizes she doesn't have a choice. Even if she had to sell her soul to a demon, she wanted to live. The devilish one says it was a great answer. He grabs her by the neck and says, just like she said, he's much closer to being a demon than a god. Then he bites. Blood starts flowing through her body. He places her down gently and tells the creatures nearby to keep watch. Their job now was to protect this woman until she wakes up. Meanwhile, back with the king, some soldiers arrive, reporting that the second princess is surrounded. He says he understands and tells them to proceed with the mission. A great nation was about to rise, and this was no time for hesitation. The king was eager to put an end to the hunger spreading through the country and rescue the abandoned orphans. Sounds a little too noble to be true. I seriously doubt it. But then he says he also feels guilty for having done nothing before. Or I don't know what to make of him anymore. He knows it's been a long journey to get there. It was tough finding comrades who shared his ideals, but it was finally time to rebuild the nation. Except no, it wasn't. Takafuji already launched an attack and blood went flying. The soldiers freeze in shock, and look who's back. Ayana, the fierce blonde, is here again. She knew something shady was going on. Yeah, the king's already been sliced up like a cartoon steak. Our guy holds up that basketball-sized thing in his hand and declares that with this, their plan had failed. There was no reason to keep fighting. So, now what? More soldiers charge in, yelling that they're going to kill. But right then, he summoned his blades, saying he actually prefers this option. Seeing as how they'd already come this far, he figures they might as well finish the job and fight to the last man. Boom, a little something for their troubles. Our guy even thanks them for the entertainment, adding that if they actually survive till the end, he'll be even more thrilled. Meanwhile, a group of girls is sprinting through the castle, wondering if anyone else heard those blood-curdling screams, the sounds of pure agony. They were coming from the king's chambers, so they pick up the pace, and when they burst in, who do they find? Our boy, just standing there looking impossibly cool with his hands in his pockets. He glances up and says he remembers them all too well. It's Ayana's elite unit, the Valkyrie Squad. One of them shouts Takafuji's name, demanding to know if he's responsible for this carnage. He just looks back over his shoulder and asks if she'd actually put up a real fight if he said yes. You can just feel the rage boiling over. One of the girls grits her teeth and lunges forward. But whoa, she runs right into his blade. What just happened? Everyone thought he was just going to dodge. Our boy, just standing there looking impossibly cool with his hands in his pockets. He glances up and says he remembers them all too well. It's Ayana's elite unit, the Valkyrie Squad. But it seems he baited her with an illusion, ran her through, and ended it with a mutual strike. Her teammate is completely baffled, and he's just standing there, completely untouchable. The remaining knight calls out to Miranda and Alice, telling them to get into formation. This guy is the real deal, and they can't afford any mistakes. Takafuji, for his part, seems a little impressed. He just took down one of their own, yet they're keeping their cool. One of them raises her weapon, declaring she's aiming for a vital point. Takafuji activates his analysis skill. He immediately picks up on their magical weapons. They're unlike anything he's ever encountered. But just then, his foot gets flash frozen to the floor. One of them yells that she's got him pinned, while another says she'll take it from here. An arrow just barely zips past his head. Another one with some kind of magic artifact. The speed these girls deploy their gear is on another level entirely. It actually tears a gash across the boy's face. For real. She blitzes past him in a blur of motion. She even glances back, confident that victory is hers. But our guy's smiling right through the attack. I don't remember him being this much of a tank, but yeah, apparently he is. And that's the one thing they weren't prepared for. He's still moving. But how? She starts to realize he's intentionally avoiding a counterstrike so he doesn't get tagged himself. But in her eyes, that's the worst possible move he could have made. She rushes in for another attack, but suddenly gets tangled up in some kind of threads. Actually, it's not just her. Her entire team suddenly collapses to the floor. At this point, it's looking like a total party wipe. He then says he enjoys watching their coordinated assault, but unfortunately, he's on a bit of a tight schedule. So, he's going to give her the honor of a one-on-one duel. As a warm-up, he'll start by taking on the squad's commander. Maria is in disbelief that he still wants to fight after all this. The guy is clearly unhinged. He tells her he can tell she's probably the most skilled fighter in her group. Fighting solo, without having to worry about her teammates, would let her unleash her true potential. So why, he asks, is she still holding herself back with a team like this? She grits her teeth and lunges at him. He easily parries her strike as she screams for him to shut his mouth. He has no right to talk like he knows anything about her. Oh yeah, things are getting intense now. Takafuji flicks his wrist, revealing a smaller blade to deflect another blow. As they clash, her mind flashes back to a time when someone told her she had real talent. It was Ayana, introducing Maria to the rest of the squad, asking the girls to welcome her. Back then, Maria looked so down, with a face as flat as a pancake. But the other girls swarmed her with questions and introductions, and a blush crept onto her cheeks. Snapping back to the present, she tells Takafuji to never insult her comrades. That's something she will never forgive. He just smirks and says he loves that fighting spirit. He goads her to keep it coming. Like a total lunatic celebrating the chaos, yelling for her to bring everything she's got. But then he pauses, maybe wondering if she's even listening to his monologue. And it turns out, there she stands, clutching the head of her king. She calls out to Lehi, her voice cutting through the silence, accusing him of having the wings of a demon. Something sinks its teeth deep into her shoulder. She cries out for Alice and Miranda, desperately asking what's happening. And Takafuji just calmly informs her that, unfortunately, her friends are no longer on the side of the living. They've already been turned into ghouls, and now the real fun can begin. He muses that he kind of wished this could have lasted a little longer, but sadly, it's time for the grand finale. He gives a little wave and says the four of them can have a nice, bloody reunion now. Man, this guy is absolutely savage. Something sinks its teeth deep into her shoulder. She cries out for Alice and Miranda, desperately asking what's happening. And Takafuji just calmly informs her that, unfortunately, he just left Maria there to be served up as a meal for her own comrades. Nori always knew Takafuji had a dark side, but man, this is a whole new level of twisted. All that's left now is to put the final, bloody cherry on top of this whole mess. Outside, soldiers are being torn apart, and she comes rushing in. And there he is, just standing there with a smug grin, and her gut screamed that something was terribly wrong. For a split second, she's frozen solid, her gaze locked on the severed head. She slowly approaches, her movements almost robotic, and gently picks up the dismembered hand. Tragically, her gut feelings are never, ever wrong. Meanwhile, under the moonlight, someone muses. The moon is beautiful, isn't it? He mentions that back in his world, there's a special phrase people use for moments just like this. It's typically used when someone confesses their feelings. She asks if he's Lehi, and he just casually replies that the king's head is a little present, just for her. Oh yeah, our boy is about to let all hell break loose. You can bet on it. There she stands, clutching the head of her king. She calls out to Lehi, her voice cutting through the silence, accusing him of having the wings of a demon. Lee barely gives her a sideways glance, looking completely unbothered. She spits that she knows exactly what those wings mean. They're the sign of someone who traded their very soul for power. She calls it pathetic, to throw away all your pride just for a little extra strength. He plays dumb, saying he doesn't really get what she's so worked up about. Everything he's done, it was just to stay alive. It's not some grand, complicated scheme. She fires back that just trying to survive isn't a valid excuse. I mean, seriously? So she'd rather he just rolled over and died? That's cold. She thumps her chest, declaring that she fights for the glory of her nation. Apparently, in this world, you need a noble reason to justify your existence, and it had to be for something grand like family or country, not for selfish reasons. She claims that even something like revenge isn't a good enough excuse, and then she brings up that one time she told him to never become a demon. Hold on, did she just apologize to him? What is happening right now? Ouch, that's got to sting. Come on, Takafuji, you're not just going to let her talk to you like that, are you? He covers his face with his hand, clearly annoyed, and finally lets loose, admitting that her brother was, in fact, a truly noble person. But even after she betrayed her own people, she still has the nerve to lecture him like he's some clueless student. It's a real shame, he says. Her grand plan totally backfired, and he tells her it's about time she woke up and smelled the ashes. There's nobody left to fight at her side. He calls her by name, telling her to take a good look around. Shadowy wolves are literally crawling from the walls, dragging away the bodies of her fallen soldiers. The entire place was empty of allies. No more soldiers, no Valkyrie squad. Every single person who followed her here, everyone she was relying on, they were all gone. She was the last one standing from her entire unit. Now, sure, some of them were just knocked out, not finished for good. Their lives could be spared, but naturally, that would require her to sacrifice herself. But his next move is a little hard to figure out. After causing all this mayhem, he actually seems disappointed. He plays dumb, saying he doesn't really get what she's so worked up about. Everything he's done, it was just to stay alive. It's not some grand, complicated scheme. She already looks plenty fired up on her own. So he just acts all bored, saying this whole thing isn't exciting anymore and that he'll be generous, seeing as he already took out the king. If she goes down, then everything is settled. As for her remaining soldiers, he'll even try to spare as many as possible, but in response, Adriana draws her sword. He's worried that maybe he won't get a good fight out of her after all. He even thinks about using some mental mojo to force her into a battle, but to be honest, she declares this a moment of silence for her fallen comrades, for those who were disgraced and slain, and for those who were prepared to die for the choice she made. It looks like she's finally ready to go all out against Takafuji. Is this what he wanted? Well, careful what you wish for. He remains perfectly calm and asks if she's really prepared to abandon all of her knights. She replies that she dedicated her entire life to training those very knights, and so, with her own two hands, she will be the one to put down every last one of them now under his control. Takafuji, genuinely surprised for a moment, points out that if she does that, there will be no one left to run the country. The entire nation will collapse, but she simply answers that the people, the ordinary citizens, will still remain. Even if every noble, soldier, and royal is wiped from existence, they are merely details. As long as the people of the nation endure, it can always be rebuilt, and that is precisely why she will continue to fight him to the very end. He suddenly stops, and a slow smile spreads across his face, leaving her completely confused. Why on earth did he look so satisfied? That's when he actually apologizes for underestimating her. He says that trying to bluff at this point would just be disrespectful, so he's going to give her his honest response. Those bodies plastered to the walls, they were just the failed experiments, the soldiers, who didn't survive the transformation into vampires. It's too late for them now. The harsh reality is everyone she trusted is already gone. At this point, they're nothing but a meal for those monsters. Oh man, here we go with the full-blown villain monologue. Asiana screams Takafuji Lee Nori's name, declaring that he is far beyond any hope of redemption. That's her cue to draw her sword, and the light it gives off is absolutely blinding. She roars that he is her enemy. Takafuji senses something is way off and starts to back away, but with a single, clean slash, she obliterates everything in her path. He's totally speechless. She was infinitely more dangerous than he had ever calculated. She had finally unleashed her ultimate trump card, the ancestral weapon itself. He never in his wildest dreams thought all of his ghouls could be annihilated in a single instant, and that look of pure fury in her eyes, that was exactly what he wanted to see. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He spreads his arms wide and calls out to the commander, announcing he's going to use every ounce of his power to face her. Now, they were officially enemies. Asiana just stands her ground, staring him down as her power surges again and again, an overwhelming pressure you can feel in the air. But Takafuji taunts her, pointing out that several of her allies are still kicking. He wants to see just how long she can last, and that's when his eyes land on the Valkyrie squad. Idiana glances over, the memory of the girls flashing in her mind. In that vision, she unleashes a single devastating slash, tearing through everything. Wolves charge in, but her sword cuts through them like they're made of butter. She challenges him, asking what the holdup is. Is he just going to stand there and spectate? Because if he won't make the first move, she damn well will. Takafuji is visibly shaken. Even his sneak attacks are completely ineffective, and honestly, she seems to be in a whole different league. He realizes getting into close combat was a terrible idea, and his mind flashes back to a lesson where he once asked, "What is Captain Anna's single greatest strength?" The answer was that she had always been incredibly powerful, but when she was promoted to commander, the queen herself blessed her with an ancient weapon, a special item that becomes exponentially sharper and more precise when infused with magic. So yeah, that explains her god-tier cutting power. Not that they're her friends at this point, but still. Those guys were getting shredded like paper. She was deflecting every single thing they threw at her. Takafui's attacks weren't even leaving a scratch. That dark-enhanced human he was so proud of was being utterly erased. Watching Angiana's sword, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. That thing could truly cut through anything, and she didn't even need to bother with magic circles. Then, out of nowhere, she slams down two gigantic, hammer-like punches from above, and now he's even more disoriented. She rips clean through his wing, then asks, "So, what's next? What are you going to do now that you have no way to escape?" He tries to steady himself by jamming a knife into the wall, knowing that letting her get close is the one thing he absolutely can't allow. He desperately throws out a few more attacks, but she's slicing through them like it's child's play. He keeps trying to hug the wall, completely desperate, but of course, she closes the gap in a heartbeat. In a last-ditch effort, he flips through the air and manages to slip behind her, but damn, his entire arm gets lopped clean off. The hand just went flying. He lands behind her and actually says he thought he was doing a pretty good job. He has to admit, though, there are absolutely no blind spots in her offense. The guy is still unbelievably cocky. She fires back that he's pretty nimble and should consider a career as an acrobat. He apologizes, saying that's unfortunately not really his style. At that very moment, he finally notices the pure mithril sword in her hands. He realizes the weapon not only let her pour her mana directly into the blade, but also allowed her to use any magic without a circle. He then smirks and says that this mithril stuff is pretty potent against a demon boy, isn't it? She confirms that's exactly right, guessing he probably heard that from the second princess. She calls him an intelligent boy for figuring it out. He thanks her for paying him so much close attention. All the while, she never stops her slow, steady approach. What she didn't anticipate was a knife suddenly flying from his hand, but with a slick no-look parry, she bats it away. The poor guy is starting to look rattled, and she just says he's full of amusing little tricks. She demands to know what his next trick is. Holy crap, are you seeing this fight? It has been a hot minute since I've seen a battle this absolutely insane. He laughs that she caught on, right before activating his binding ability. Of course, Aina effortlessly cuts the threads to pieces. He's finally realizing that nothing in his arsenal is working. Just as she's about to move in for the finish, she's suddenly hammered by a barrage of attacks. Up on the wall, it's Fenmer, casting down lightning. That sly dog, Takafuji, had slipped out of her barrier's effective range. He had strategically placed Fenmer outside and ordered him to attack. She has to admit, his familiar has a pretty solid strategy. Too bad for him. She spots his attack from a mile away. He realizes the wretch isn't even tracking his magic. Her natural reaction speed is just plain insane. She launches another hammer, and Femur zips out of the way. Our boy is frantically shouting for Femur to stay out of her reach and keep up the pressure, all while slinging his own knives. But the blonde warrior easily defends herself, admitting the sheer volume of attacks is impressive. Still, she wonders how he could possibly maintain this pace. His whole strategy was to drain her energy, but she's conserving a ton of it, destroying everything he throws with ease. The way things are going, he's going to run out of daggers and mana long before she even breaks a sweat. He's scrambling for a new plan, seeing as her barrier covers the entire area. Her reaction time is so fast she can ignore any number of his attacks. Not to mention, Femur's supposedly accurate strikes aren't hitting a thing. That's when he starts to notice a contradiction. If her reflexes are that good, why is her barrier wrapped so tightly around her body? He decides to get closer, betting there's a weak point in that strategy. The commander smirks, wondering if he's charging in like a madman because he thinks she's too busy defending. What a simple mind. It's not like she can't handle both at once. And man, she's on him in an instant. She threw up a razor-sharp barrier right behind him, and his hand gets lopped clean off. Our boy is about to become a human stump. She then declares that his end has come. All she needs to do now is run her sword through his head, and it's all over. He, however, just smiles and tells her it won't be that easy. From right beneath her, the wolf erupts from her own shadow and sinks its teeth into her leg. He explains that since her detection is limited to extremely close range, the only way in was through the shadows. At this point, she's torn between dealing with the creature on her leg or the man charging straight for her. Seeing as the wolf seemed far less of a threat, she decides to focus on Takafuji. The problem is, she then notices he still has one good hand, and he flashes a grin, saying that, unfortunately for her, she let her guard down. Now she's rattled, wondering if her sword alone will be enough to stop him. Takafuji keeps closing in, almost touching her barrier. Suddenly, the word hypnosis flashes in her mind, right as Takafuji says she looked directly into his eyes. A magical barrier materializes in front of her. Her eyes glow yellow, but she instantly slices right through the illusion. He's shocked that her sword can even cut through magic circles. He then fires off another spell to create some distance. The wolf on her foot gets cut down, and she demands to know what he just did. He replies, "How should I know?" She tells him to stop laughing like an idiot, but he just says she's funny, too. Wasn't she the one enjoying this? She retorts, "How should I know? Damn, they're just trading insults mid-battle." He then tells her to look up. Remember those attacks he launched earlier? As always, she defended herself. Takafuji was gearing up for the grand finale. His eyes and gauntlet begin to glow as magic circles appear behind her. She sees the new formation and wonders what he's planning. She was about to unleash another slash, but in that instant, he teleports out of the circle right behind her. She's completely confused, and he thinks that it's just as he predicted. Her first reaction was to try and cut the portal. His whole plan was to bait her into an attack to lock up her arm, but then he suddenly starts screaming as she looks on in terror. I think he went in for a big bite on Lil Blondie. The critical thing for her is that she can't afford to fall for his hypnosis, but at the very same time, her foot is still injured. She knew that if she focused on her barrier, she wouldn't have enough time, so she decides on an all-or-nothing move. She uses her air hammer magic to propel herself forward, and man, her arm moves at a blistering speed. Obviously, Takafuji realizes what the crazy woman just did, but still, the blade went through him like a hot knife through butter. The kid is in total disbelief, calling out her name. And what's this? A basketball spinning on the floor? Nope, that's our boy's head. At the same time, Femur lunges from behind to get some revenge. But of course, she just casually flicks a sword slash in its direction, and the little wolf dissolves into thin air. Our boy's body is just there, twitching. Meanwhile, she lets out an exhausted laugh, saying goodbye to Takafuji Leori. That psycho acts like everything's chill under the moonlight, holding our hero's head in her hands. It had been a long time since she had to go all out, but she knew she couldn't afford to fail now. Just as she starts thinking about the second princess, bam! Her hand, the one holding his head, is sliced clean off. She looks completely bewildered, and by the looks of it, he straight up chomped it off. Then she whips around and bam, sends a kick straight into his headless body, sending it flying into the wall. The poor girl is totally gassed, and when she opens her eyes, there he is, our boy, just casually holding his own head. He pops it right back on his neck like it's a Lego piece and says he's fine, even giving it a good crack for effect. She's left standing there, completely baffled, wondering how in the world not even Mithril worked on him. He points out how hilarious it is that everyone just assumes Mithril is the end-all, be-all for demons, and hey, maybe that's true in this world. But tough luck for them, he's not from around here, so he's playing by a completely different set of rules. As she's trying to wrap her head around that, he explains he actually confirmed this theory way back when she sliced off his hand. It dawns on Ediana that he intentionally played possum, acting like he couldn't regenerate just to bait her into letting her guard down. Talk about a 5 to 100 IQ play. Meanwhile, Takafuji's thinking to himself that he suspected all along that the brain isn't the main control center for vampires. He remembers during his brawl with Fenrir, his entire spine was shattered, Yet the guy kept going like he just stubbed his toe, which was just completely bonkers. The truth is, a vampire's heart is their actual core. You can tear up everything else, but as long as that ticker is safe, they're good to go. He then admits that he only came out on top by a stroke of luck, since he didn't have much practice fighting someone on her level. She just replies that she gets it, and he confesses he had to go all out, holding nothing back. And just like that, this wild woman starts laughing again. Turns out, she had already figured that part out. He just stares at her, muttering, "Man, she is completely wrecked." He then announces his plan. He's going to absorb all of her power, saying making her a ghoul would be a total snooze fest. So this is where they part ways. Whoa, did he actually do it? Takafuji, you are one crazy dude. A little while later, and I'll be honest, I totally forgot these guys were even here. Lehi shows up, commenting on what a huge mess Ryu made. The poor guy calls out to Lehi, who announces he's got the magic key for their great escape, and the girls, ecstatic, rush right over to him, gushing about how worried they were. He just coolly replies that he's well aware, then flips the switch on his hypnosis, telling them they should probably worry about themselves first. Ryu starts yelling, demanding to know what he's doing and telling him to cut it out, but our boy just tells him to take a chill pill. He's not planning on hurting them, and then bam, Ryu gets hit with the hypnosis too, and our guy orders him to get lost. But Ryu is totally confused, wondering why his own body won't listen to him. Our hero realizes this dude actually has some serious willpower to fight it off. Still, he calls the two girls over and tells them he has a small favor to ask. He needs them to clean up the massive mess he's made. He explains that, well, a lot went down. She needs to take this staff, make sure she torches the entire place, and stage it to look like he bit the dust in the fire too. The girls, completely under his spell, think it's an amazing idea, asking, can she really pull that off? He assures her it'll be a piece of cake if she just lets go of the mental blocks holding her powers back. Next, he tells Alwa to throw up a barrier around them so they don't get crispy. And the next thing you know, the girl starts powering up, screaming that she can feel it. She can really burn everything to the ground. Ryu is freaking out, yelling at Tamaki that there are still innocent people inside. He screams that she's going to get everyone cooked, but she just calmly says it's fine. She's going to put her whole soul into it. He's still screaming his head off, but sparks are already flying and then kaboom. The whole place is engulfed in flames. The entire mansion just blows sky high, and from miles away, you can see the castle being consumed by the inferno. Even tucked away inside Elway's barrier, which is supposed to be total protection, Takafuji can still feel the intense heat. I guess that's what you get from a hero who's packing some serious divine power. But standing before the raging inferno, someone is watching the castle turn to ash. It seems they're remembering Amanda, who passed away, and the poor little maid who died alongside her, screaming that she can feel it, she can really burn everything to the ground. Ryu is freaking out, yelling at Tamaki that there are still innocent people inside. But wait a second, remember how this whole crazy story kicked off? She appears with that exact same look on her face, calling out Takafuji's name. Is it possible she's the one who yeeted him into this world in the first place? But how could that even work? Your guess is as good as mine. He asks if it's all over, and she asks right back if he's done with his cleanup. He looks totally shocked. She knew his plan all along. She explains that the second he entered her body, she gained all that knowledge. Hold up, entered her body? That had to be from the bite, right? She just says she wasn't expecting a complete hair color makeover as part of the deal. Naturally, he points out that a new hair color is a way better outcome than, being dead. She says it's weird, though, that it feels like she's kind of blocked by his thoughts and words. She's not sure how hard it'll be to hit him, and he thanks her, but apparently it wasn't that hard. She smacks him to the ground. Even lying there, he says things might not be so bad after all. Besides, he thinks the new hair color suits her. Oh, now that she's at Takafuji too, right? All cheerful now. Then she says it's true. She didn't lose everything. She survived and gained a bit of freedom. The cost was just her entire family, her sister, and everything else. She's okay with it because she's found something she wants to do. She's not sure if in this state as a servant she'll ever be stronger than him, but that's exactly what she wants to earn back her true freedom. Tepugu is a bit impressed and says it's a good idea. Poor thing she doesn't even realize, right? Me, under a servant contract like that, she's got no chance at all. He says that now that the little princess has made up her mind, they can head to the place he's been using as a base. She's confused as he starts walking off, but he tells her that after explaining everything, it's better they get away from there first. She's already all stunned and impressed because what the hell? He's using that old femur barrier that hides everything, even set up his little shack inside it. She wants to know how he built something so complex, and he says he just used his forging skills. Even so, she complains that the place is kind of plain, right? Not to mention too small for two people. Takafuji, poor guy, just tells her that of course it's going to be smaller than the castle she used to live in. No way to hide something that big anymore. And she better get used to living in a tiny house that doesn't even fit a bed. She sits down next to him and says she doesn't care. She never saw herself as royalty anyway. And besides, my having a bed is fine. she'll just sleep right there next to him. After all, she survived thanks to him and doesn't owe anything to anyone. He's a bit thrown off, and she says this is the only way she can repay him. Girl, what are you thinking? What are you trying to offer here? That's what Takafu is wondering. He says that from the looks of it, he won't even have to give an order, and she replies that she's ready. He tells her to take it off, and boom, she's healed. My God, what's going on here? Dude, seriously. And she stands up all fired up asking if it was good enough. Takafuji activates his special vision, weapon forging vision. Oh, you sly dog gave her an outfit, didn't you? She's a little confused. He says it's weird seeing her in those rags. He clarifies that becoming a subordinate wasn't meant in that sense. And besides, he chooses who he spends his time with. For her to offer herself like that, she must be real confident. Damn, he just shut her down, rejected, and embarrassed her. She's left there all shaken. She thanks him anyway and runs off while he thinks she really is a little princess. Outside, the poor girl is muttering that she messed up. Why did she try something like that? She just wanted to show she was willing and motivated. In the end, she was the only one who survived, betrayed her country, and left everyone behind. Maybe all of this is some kind of punishment. Then, Takafuji suddenly asks if the punishment she thought she deserved was sleeping with him. She jumps startled, and he says it's surprising how rude she is. She's confused and tries to apologize again, saying he misunderstood and that he has no idea how grateful she really is. He doesn't seem to fully believe her. Desperate, she begs him to believe that everything she's saying is true. Even though she's no longer human, she survived and she doesn't regret any of it. Then he says there's something he wants to try and asks if she wants to help. Excited, she says that if it's something she can do, absolutely. He explains that he got several skills back at the castle, but there's one he can't use alone. She's already pumped, saying that if that's the case, she can definitely help until he says it's a sexual skill. And she's just like, wait, what do you mean, right? Then he pulls her clothes and says, you said you'd help, so now you've got to be ready. Besides, it's just a little touch before bed. She tells him that kind of thing isn't healthy, but he just says she promised she'd do anything, so she's got to accept it. Man, in the end, he made all that fuss and still went through with it. Damn, Takafuji, you scumbag. In the next chapter, and she's just like, wait, what do you mean, right? Then he pulls her clothes and says, you said you'd help, so now you've got to be ready. So, naturally, he decides to instantly max out every single one. He then calls for the little witch to come on down, and man, he's starting to wonder who the real genius is here. He's genuinely impressed by how quickly she's mastered flying. He asks her how the new clothes feel and if they need any adjustments, but she says they're perfect and super easy to move in. He's a bit surprised. Unlike him, she has no problem going all out with her powers. Besides, it's just a little touch before bed. She tells him that kind of thing isn't healthy, but he just says she promised she'd do anything. She admires it, calling it a beautiful blade, and asks if he used some kind of transformation magic. He explains that he tried to juice up his old sword with dark magic. It morphed into something like the absolute ancient blade of black power, but since that's a total mouthful, he's just calling it the Black Sword. She's blown away that he managed to create a weapon of that caliber. He just shrugs, saying that while it sounds cool, it was a complete dud when he tried to use it. He figures it's because his magic isn't compatible with this world system. He sighs, realizing that unfortunately, yeah, this is probably going to be a recurring issue. That's precisely why he's giving it to her, hoping she can unlock its true power. And besides, let's be real, the sword's new look is just plain sick. She playfully teases him, asking if he's sure he wants her to get that powerful. He just scoffs, telling her to bring it on. He's got plenty of other ways to get stronger, and besides, a real contest of strength shouldn't depend on who has the cooler weapon. He also points out that since he can't use the sword, it forces him to learn skills that only someone from his world could master. She nods, understanding that his ability to break this world's rules is exactly why he keeps gaining new powers. It's setting them up for an epic showdown to see who'll be stronger in the end, but she just smirks and says that contest is already over. He asks what she means, and she just flashes her fangs. That's when it hits him like a ton of bricks. Oh crap, she inherited all my abilities. But before he can process that bombshell, she's already glomping Fenrir, gushing about how absolutely adorable he is. He tries to warn her that the puppy is a savage beast, which makes Fenrir immediately cower and hide. She pouts a little, saying she just wanted a closer look at the wolf, which prompts him to ask if she's an animal person. She says not really, but she was always the one stuck taking care of the pets her sister got tired of. Shaking it off, Takafuji gets back to business and says it's time to move out, suggesting they head to the nearest nation to do some recon. He figures a country that hasn't summoned a hero would be their safest bet, but she immediately shuts that idea down, telling him a place like that doesn't exist. Not a single country in this world has skipped out on summoning heroes. He's floored, so she explains about the alliance of 32 heroes, which requires every member nation to summon a specific quota of heroes. His first thought is that this is massive overkill. Why in the world would they need so many? This spells huge trouble for him, since it means the world is crawling with people who might be hunting him. A list that includes the blonde-haired guy from that one battle who just up and disappeared, and that annoying punk Ryu and his crew who also vanished. He knows it's only a matter of time before they all become a major headache. The scene then shifts, and we hear a sinister voice listing off various races: beastmen, mages, elves, half-dragons, and even humans. The voice declares they will all be used as vessels for his return. Then an eye begins to form in the darkness, followed by a hand. Yep, you can bet your bottom dollar that's the Demon King. The very Demon King that those 32 heroes were summoned to defeat. Big shocker, I know. Lord Ignoya, the demon lord of this world, has officially arrived. Meanwhile, back in a bustling port city, we see a certain someone walking around with total confidence. The streets are buzzing when an old man calls out to her, handing her some bread as a thank you for her help the other day. She seems a little confused by the gesture, but more and more people start giving her things, all of them calling her Arya. Apparently, that's the alias she's been using to fly under the radar. It's been a little while since she and Takafuji first arrived in the city of Reagan, a place known for its distinct block-style architecture. It's also considered a holy nation, which means the church wields an insane amount of power here. The good news is, the city has an adventurers guild. The voice declares they will all be used as vessels for his return. Then an eye begins to form in the darkness, followed by a hand. Yep, you can bet your bottom dollar that's the Demon King. But the second she announces her return, bam, he's sent flying out of the house with a busted nose, slamming clean into a wall. It can't be that bad though, since he's already on the ground wailing for help. You could feel the tension in the air. This formidable woman remarks that it's actually impressive he didn't black out from a hit like that. It was pretty shocking that a guy who spends all his time hitting on women could be that durable. You could tell she was definitely into him. And get this, her name is Fanatic Loss. Wait, hold on. Seriously, that's her actual name. Oh my god, that's really her name. She then declares she's going to rehabilitate our boy. She grabs his face while Takafuji's brain is still trying to process what she just said. Arya, meanwhile, is just standing there completely baffled with no clue what is happening. But yeah, it's pretty clear she wasn't a fan of that little exchange. And just like that, a new chapter began in this country. Now, let's switch over to Takafuji's point of view. The guy has been living at the taverns ever since he joined the guild. Seriously, what's his deal? Did he wipe out all the monsters already? And now he's just kicking back. Alright, fine. I guess I can let him slide for wanting to relax a little. The bartender keeps asking him to settle his bill, but he just tells her to put it on his tab. If he ever runs out of cash, he'll just start using Arya's money. And while our hero is busy becoming the town drunk, Arya is out there grinding away, completing one quest after another, earning herself the nickname Black Rose. The other adventurers started calling her that after watching her effortlessly cut down swarms of monsters, all while twirling in her little dress. And Takafuji? He's just soaking it all up, living the good life while she brings in all the gold. Nobody at the guild can understand why the Black Rose wastes her time with a bum like him. Eventually, some guy asks why he doesn't try earning his own keep. He points out that mooching off a woman isn't a very manly look. Takafuji just brushes him off, telling him to mind his own damn business. Then he notices that the same dude who always used to drink by himself in the corner is now trying to cozy up to him. As Takafuji continues drinking to build up his poison resistance, he's also getting a feel for the lay of the land in the city. The only problem is, he's drinking so heavily that people are actively starting to steer clear of him. Then, all of a sudden, the tavern door chimes and in walks that zealous fanatic with the bizarre name. Takafuji wonders what a cleric is even doing in a dive like this and, true to form, immediately invites her to join him for a drink, but she lectures him that drinking so much is harmful to both the body and the soul. She preaches that moderation in all things is the superior path. He, on the other hand, starts zeroing in on the mark on her forehead, claiming he can't see it very well and asks her to lean in closer. Man, I'm not even sure what his game plan was here. I'm pretty sure he reached for her, but she dodged it, warning him that he can't just go around touching things like that. And that was the exact moment Arya walked in, just as the entire bar witnessed him getting slammed to the floor, leaving him a bloody mess. She sees the unhinged woman gripping his face, shocked that he's still conscious. The other patrons are just howling with laughter, saying the town drunk finally got what was coming to him for being a lazy bum all day. At last, someone was finally going to teach that guy a lesson. Fanatique confirms that's precisely her intention. She proclaims that her god shows no mercy, then declares that in the name of her deity, she is taking the boy with her. But then she spots the Black Rose glaring at her and asks if she has a problem. Poor Arya, completely mortified, just stammers out a no. Hold up, is she really not going to step in for our guy? Oh, this is bad. But wait, it turns out she does want to know what this woman intends to do with him. Oh, don't get the wrong idea, Fanatique explains. The guy made a pass at me. But she admits his resilience is impressive. So, it's a good thing she's rescuing him. With that, she says her goodbyes. The whole tavern is just staring at Arya, totally bewildered and waiting for her next move. A few people even tell her she's finally free of that deadbeat. But in that very moment, she drops her bag and tells everyone to wait a second. Her face turns bright red as she bolts out the door after him. The entire crowd is left completely stunned, wondering what she could possibly see in a weirdo like that. We cut to another part of town where Fanatique has just slammed our poor hero onto a bench and is bringing her massive hand right up to his face. It looks like she's about to use some kind of holy magic on him. She even says she'll go easy on him. This woman has absolutely zero respect for our guy. For real, but it turns out that giant hand was just to cast a healing spell. With Takafuji all patched up, she asks if he feels better and tells him to lay off the booze already. He asks her who she is, and of course, here comes the classic weirdo introduction. She's Fanatique the Templar, or he can call her Fauna for short, but she insists the most important thing right now is for them to go say a prayer. Meanwhile, Ailey is trailing behind them, practically green with envy and fuming that they're holding hands. Like, what is even happening right now? Is this kind of thing normal in this world, or what? Just then, someone whispers that the woman is dangerous. It's Fenmer, right beside her. He says he's not sure if his master caught on, but he definitely picked up the scent of strong divine protection coming from her. Aaliyah looks totally confused, and Fenmer just gives her a little wink, knowing she must have sensed it too. That's exactly why she needs to stick with the kid. Inside the church, Fanatique tells Takafuji to soak it all in, saying it's a real privilege to be in a place this incredible. She then asks for his name, and he tells her it's Kiri. As he's staring at the statues and asking what they are, she explains that's the main goddess. She tells him not to worry, just to copy her prayer posture. Bring your 5 fingertips together to represent the main goddess, then the other 4, close your eyes, and pray. So now he's just playing along, not entirely sure how he got roped into this. But hey, might as well have a little fun with it, right? He starts thinking about how he's never actually prayed a day in his entire life. But as he's going through the motions, someone or something seems to notice him. Fanatique looks a little startled. He gets this weird feeling like he's being watched, like he's suddenly connected to something. He wonders if it's Fran's doing, but some gut instinct tells him it's not her. And whatever this is, it doesn't feel like normal magic or any physical phenomenon. It's like something is literally staring into his soul, and he is not happy about it one bit. He demands to know who the hell is messing with his head like that, shouting that he doesn't know who it is, but they better get the hell out of his mind. And just like that, the connection vanishes. Fanatique comments that she noticed he was praying with way more passion than she expected. She figures he must have realized how beautiful it is. Now that his heart has been purified, it's time to move on to the next step. Takafuji, though, was just staring at that smiling statue, totally intrigued by this mysterious power. He knows now he has to come back and figure out what really went down in that place. Elsewhere, 2 women are talking. The one with white hair says the connection was severed. The blue-haired one agrees, saying she never imagined a mere human could pull something like that off. And somewhere in the shadows, the garden host squad now knows exactly who Takafuji is, or rather, who Kiri really is. The bell rings, and our boy Takafuji is back at the bar. And that bearded guy is still there, flying solo. You know, call me crazy, but that dude kind of looks like the Demon King. It just hit me. 10 out of 10 theory. Then the guy says, our boy's looking good. Dang. When did Takafuji get so banged up? All right, that was Fanatique, who absolutely wrecked him in broad daylight while he was at his weakest. Just you wait till nighttime, lady, we'll see what he does to you then. He's just thinking to himself how this lunatic, who calls herself a Templar, suddenly ambushed him out of nowhere. And the problem is, her hits really sting. It's not just because she's strong, it's because he's a vampire, and she's using light-based attacks. Then she says she noticed way back at the tavern that he has an exceptionally sharp eye. Too bad his body can't keep up with his eyes. Once again, he's blown away by how perceptive she is. But she couldn't care less and just keeps wailing on him, saying he'll get used to it eventually. While he's begging for a break, Arya is off to the side watching the whole thing, saying the poor guy is really going through it. Maybe they should step in. If this keeps up, there won't be anything left of him. But Fenmer reminds her that Takafuji specifically asked them not to interfere unless it was a real emergency. Besides, he's pretty sure the guy could slip away anytime he wanted to. So maybe he has some other goal in mind that they just don't get. And finally, his objective is reached. Time to book it. Back at the bar, the bearded guy says he gets it now. He's impressed that the kid actually managed to give that maniac the slip. But the Templars in this world, yeah. They take people out in the name of making offerings to the main goddess. They've got all sorts of powerful tools at their disposal. And the biggest headache when dealing with them is the strategies they use. That's why he tells Takafuji not to get too tangled up with them and to forget about becoming a Templar himself. It's just not his style. Takafuji agrees, saying, yeah, he definitely got the vibe that it wasn't for him. But what he really wants to know is how this guy is so sure he can't use magical tools. Right in the middle of their chat, boom, Fanatique shows up again. This girl does not quit. She tells him he's a good runner, but it's time to get back to training. You've got to be kidding me. This guy might actually send a thank you note to the place he was first captured. A real genius move. The bearded dude starts to wonder if those two are actually best friends. He knew our boy had a thing for her, but he never imagined he'd let himself get beaten to a pulp just to keep her around. Takafuji was desperately trying to cook up a strategy to counter that kind of magic, but at this rate, He was going to be pushing up daisies before he figured anything out. That's why, knowing his only way out, he played his trump card. He suggested they pop back to the church for a quick prayer session. And of course, she was over the moon. She's absolutely giddy, saying she can't believe he actually wants to pray to the goddess and that his heart must truly be changing. But in reality, our guy is just trying to escape her torturous training and investigate that bizarre phenomenon from before. The moment he gets back to the location, he immediately notices that the feeling of being watched is completely gone. He starts to wonder if the master and her followers are actually connected to someone else entirely. And wait a minute, why is he even calling that girl a master? What he does realize, however, is that since his detection skill can't pinpoint the source, it's probably a power from another world. Maybe, just like his own abilities, it didn't originate here. He decides to run his analysis skill on absolutely everything around him. It's not the statue, not the worshippers, not even their clothes. Then, all of a sudden, he detects a strange substance. His eyes light up as he realizes he's found exactly what he was looking for. This weird sacred stone seems to be the conduit connecting to the so-called goddess. That was the source of the creepy sensation that made him feel like he was linked to something. But he vividly remembers that blonde goddess, and this feeling is definitely not her. He starts to think he might have just accidentally picked a fight with the real gods of this world. He figures that's enough information for one day. Just then, Fanatique's face turns beet red, completely startled. Someone else had just shown up. Apparently, it's this guy named Lord Raven, the capital's celebrated hero and the captain of the Holy Knights. Years ago, he defended the entire city from a horde of monsters, and now the people basically worship him as a living legend. Takafuji just shrugs him off as her boss and isn't all that impressed. Meanwhile, she waves him goodbye, telling him she'll catch up with him at the tavern later. And just like that, our boy gets ditched. He figures this new guy can't be that much stronger than him and tries to run an analysis. But the instant he does, the captain whips around, forcing Takafuji to dive for cover. He's not sure if the guy actually detected the analysis, but he definitely sensed something was up. And yeah, this could get real risky, real fast. His companions ask if he's okay, and he just plays it cool, muttering something about a weird smell. Hold on, was it the scent of his own kind? Could that guy be another summoned hero? You know, that would actually make a lot of sense. A little while later, the training ground is getting wrecked while Aliyah sits there, bored out of her mind, watching the two of them go at it. It looks like Takafuji has been training with Fanatique all day long, and they've barely said two words to each other, which is exactly why she's so over it. Fanatique is busy trying to land some of her holy hammer strikes, remarking that he's finally learning how to dodge. He offers a thank you, not really sure if that's the right thing to say. After that fight with Ayana, he's learned how dangerous magical tools can be. But Fanatique isn't letting up, asking if he's just going to play defense forever. He thinks about it, his mind flashing to those black knives he has. The only problem is they run on dark magic, so he just tells her to forget it. Suddenly, she grins and smacks him with another hammer strike, declaring that it's settled. Tomorrow, he's going weapon hunting. An adventurer can't be walking around unarmed, after all. Besides, she's busy all day tomorrow with Lord Raven, so training is cancelled. He's a little confused. Wait, is this girl actually into Lord Raven? He wonders. Later that evening, he goes to talk to Arya, who's sitting there looking completely downcast. He asks if she's figured out a way to beat him yet. She's been watching him train all day, but she just replies with a distracted no. He remarks that it's strange, seeing as she and Farrer have been watching him for hours and still haven't come up with a single idea. She doesn't really give him a response, just continues to drift in her gloomy mood. She finally asks if he needs something. He simply asks if she's free tomorrow. As for calling Fanatique, the master, look, I know he's only doing it because he wants to learn positive magic even though he's a creature of darkness, but I'm still not a fan of it. Anyway, she was the one who told him to go find a weapon. So, Takafuji figures he ought to ask Aliyah to come with him, seeing as he doesn't know any of the city's shops, and she obviously does. She immediately lights up, insisting she's completely free. Sure, she has some quests, but she says that's nothing to worry about. Honestly, Takafuji would be totally lost without her. She grabs his hand and announces it's time to go, while he's just thinking about how unbelievably excited she seems. I gotta say, for some reason, I'm starting to really like this girl. It's rare to find a female main character who's actually this endearing. As they walk through the city chatting about food, Takafuji cuts in, saying he wants to focus on weapons. She gets visibly flustered and awkward, mostly because she was just hoping to enjoy some time with him. Then she snaps out of it and tells him to hurry up, leading him to a specific shop. When they step inside, they're met with a bunch of pretty mediocre weapons on display. But Takafuji, ever the sly one, uses his analyze skill to check out their true quality. It turns out there are actually a few good pieces hidden among the duds. A lot of the weapons are decent, but the catch is that they're all magic-based, and he can't use this world's mana. Then she points out this huge skull-themed scythe, calling it super cute and adding that it's not even a magical weapon, but he shoots it down. Our guy's starting to act all confident with her, huh? She's thinking the same thing, like, yeah, that actually does suit him. He tells her she should use this opportunity to buy something for herself too, mentioning her katana draws more attention than it should. She figures he has a point. Something more compact and low-key would be a smarter move. In her case, all it takes is a quick glance to the side, and she's already spotted what she wants. But before she can grab it, Takafuji reaches out, saying he'll check it first. It's a mithril dagger, the exact kind of item he despises the most. As usual, it's designed to be a conduit for magic, so yeah, it's perfect for her. She starts to worry about the price, but he tells her not to sweat it. I mean, of course, he goes out hunting every night. That's how he can afford to just lounge around drinking at the bar all day, right? Did we all forget he's a vampire? She's still a bit hesitant about the cost, but he tells her again not to worry. He says the only thing he spends money on is booze, so he'll cover it. She gets all flustered, tilting her head in that way she always does. The shopkeeper thanks them for the purchase, and Takafuji says it's a shame. In the end, he didn't find anything for himself, but she's left wondering if he even realizes what giving her that dagger implies. He's totally confused, thinking, "What are you talking about, you weirdo?" Meanwhile, she's blushing furiously, completely smitten. The girl is a goner. So, they go back to wandering the shops, checking out more stores, past spiders, through the whole city. But they still can't find anything good until they suddenly stumble upon the most suspicious-looking place ever. A cave with a stone-faced butler standing out front. The old gentleman welcomes them, and our two goofballs just stand there looking utterly confused. The butler explains that they exclusively make custom weapons here. Whatever they want, they just have to name it, and a weapon will be crafted to perfectly match their tastes. Takafuji asks if they can make something that isn't a magical weapon. The butler says that's not a problem at all, assuring them they give their all to meet their clients' expectations with perfection. And of course, our sneaky protagonist uses his little analyze ability. And yep, he confirms the stuff here is all top tier. So now, he's very interested in placing an order. The butler says he looks forward to it and invites him inside to see all the materials and options they have. Takafuji asks if the girl can come in, too, and the man says that's no problem at all. Then this dude walks into someone else's place and starts telling them to clean better, complaining about all the cobwebs around. The old man calmly explains that the place is supposed to feel like an old person's house, but Takafuji keeps grumbling while the butler just tells him to get inside already. A while later, they're outside again. He comments that it's taking longer than he expected, but Arya says they actually decided everything really quickly, and the man says that's no problem at all. Then this dude walks into someone else's place and starts telling them to clean better, complaining about all the cobwebs around. Maybe it's because the atmosphere here is a bit better, or maybe it's just because she wanted to sit there drinking tea with him. They didn't even have to visit a ton of shops. Then she suddenly says the tea is delicious. He just comments that it tastes similar to the tea from the castle. Yeah, we know exactly what kind of tea she wants. After a bit, she asks why he made his decision so fast. He reveals he used Analyze on the butler and saw that everything there was top-tier quality. The only red flag was how grimy the place was, which just screamed bad at business. And of course, speak of the devil, look who just waltzed in. Fanatique, for the love of all that is holy, can this woman take a hint? She barges right in, totally wrecking our guy's peaceful tea time. He just asks what his dear master is doing there. He asks if she didn't have a date to get to. She just brushes it off, saying she's back now, and immediately grills him about whether he's been out hitting on other girls. Maybe it's because the atmosphere here is a bit better. Or maybe it's just because she wanted to sit there drinking tea with him. The newcomer introduces himself as Mask and explains that he's one of the people assigned to keep an eye on Fanatique. Takafuji thinks that's pretty weird and asks why she needs a babysitter. She explains that the church higher-ups are a bit strict. Arya immediately jumps in, shouting that's not it at all, she and Kiri are just partners. A masked man then tells Fanatique to chill out, and she quickly apologizes, realizing she's not exactly being a role model for her god right now. He finds it hard to believe that a guy like him, who's already linked with a stunning adventurer like the Black Rose, would also be going after Fanatique. He says rumors about the two of them are flying all over the city. Takafuji just shrugs it off, saying people will believe what they want, but then Mask reveals he's also interested in the guy who managed to team up with the Black Rose. He then whips out a letter, proudly declaring himself the #1 fan in her official fan club. And now this dude wants our boy to teach him his secrets for attracting amazing women. Unbelievable. He dramatically slams his forehead on the table and proclaims that from this day forward, Takafuji is his master. A little while later, Mask is still glued to his side, begging for dating advice, while the two girls chat nearby. But then Fanatique asks if it's really true that the famous Black Rose is partnered up with that drunkard. Arya confirms it. Fanatique then happens to glance over, spots the mithril dagger, and immediately asks what the deal is with that. She's super nosy about it, and you can just tell Arya is thinking, girl, mind your own business. But Fanatique just looks genuinely confused. Because apparently, in this world, giving someone a mithril dagger is the equivalent of a marriage proposal. What the heck? How does that even make sense? Fanatique, being her usual meddlesome self, puts two and two together. She says it would be hilarious if Kiri actually knew what it meant when he gave it to her. but she's almost certain he had no clue. He then declares their little chat is over for now, promising to talk with Arya more about it later, and you can just see the look on Arya's face. Arya just sits there with this tight, fake smile, basically saying, sure, whatever, while thinking the whole conversation was a total drag. I already wasn't a fan of Fanatique messing with my girl, and now I'm ready to throw down. No second thoughts about it. Anyway, Takafuji is completely drained after a day like this. Meanwhile, Mask is lost in thought, trying to figure Kiri out since he's usually a great judge of character. But this guy is a total enigma. Later on, Fanatique waves a cheerful goodbye to our hero, telling him she had a fantastic day and that they'll have to do it again soon. He just mutters that she's way too chipper as he heads home, desperate to finally get some sleep. But of course, his night is just beginning. That's the vampire life for you. Suddenly, he gets a bad feeling and freezes right in front of his door. An unfamiliar voice then asks how he knew someone was there, complimenting his sharp intuition. The voice is speaking directly inside his head, which is all kinds of creepy. Despite that, he opens the door and walks in, coming face to face with a mysterious woman. She greets him with a casual, nice to meet you, and introduces herself as Fools. Takafuji, however, looks completely unfazed. He just calmly asks if she was the voice in his head. She finds it strange that he could sense her, but seems to have no clue about spiritual magic. And girl, what are you wearing? Whoa, ma'am, that outfit is. A choice. Seriously, what is that getup? Hey now, algorithm gods, please be merciful. She explains she's heard a lot about him and came to see for herself what kind of trash he was, but then she offers to teach him spiritual magic if he's interested. Like, make it make sense. Then she grabs his hand, telling him to come closer and yanking him forward. Whoa there, lady, slow your roll. I want to be Takafuji right now, not just watch him get manhandled like this. I mean, the guy literally just got pulled onto a bed by a total stranger, and he is receptive. Okay, then. But just as things are heating up, she suddenly activates some kind of interference magic. And here I thought we knew where this was headed, but nope, she had totally different plans. He figured that being this close, her hypnosis was a sure thing, but she just looks at him, flashes a little heart sign, and says, sorry, but not tonight. Still, she plants a kiss on him, and boom, he's knocked out cold, zapped into some other dimension, not exactly the romantic turn he was hoping for. When he comes to, all confused, he asks where the heck they are. She explains they're inside her mental world, which is basically a personal dimension that exists inside everyone, and her power just keeps on growing. Vines erupt from the ground as she declares that in this space, she is in complete control of everything. He's totally powerless. For example, she can just poof his armor away, leaving his spirit completely exposed. Then she says, well, this is where things get a little complicated. Essentially, she's planning to drive him insane, but in a way that leaves no trace. Her goal is to make his very soul dependent on her. And yeah, she's going for a full hostile takeover. Takafuji is trying to fight back, but it's clearly an uphill battle. She calls him out, pointing out that he's a virgin and questions why he has so many attendants around, but never actually does the deed. She taunts him, asking if maybe he's just afraid of getting close. And boy, that hits a nerve. He starts radiating dark energy and tells her to shut her mouth. He snarls that fear has nothing to do with it. Suddenly, a magic circle blazes to life behind her, and the world she thought she controlled, bam, it starts to completely fall apart. The plants instantly wither and die as a hand reaches for her face. Takafuji goes into full demon mode and roars at her to shut up again, all to keep his mind from being devoured. You got that? The guy actually dares to challenge her so-called absolute control. How perfect for him, because when it comes to the art of domination, he considers himself a master in his own right. Meanwhile, Arya walks up to the door, throws it open, and yells for him to stop, just as things get super weird. Yep, she walks right in on that whole mess. The girl is crying black goo, and Takafuji just casually turns his head and goes, oh, hey, Arya, you're back. I thought our girl was going to back down, but not a chance. She whips out the Myethil dagger. Lord help us all. Meanwhile, the other girl, now fully clothed again, just drops to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. And what in the world? Is that a tiny person in his mouth? Nope, he just spits her out. So that's what was happening. Ah, turns out her real form is this tiny little thing. She was using some kind of charm magic to honey trap people for info. And man, I'm not gonna lie, it probably would have worked on me too. Her name is Sophie, and she's a high-level wind spirit who was apparently under Lee Nori's control. She's laying out the whole story for Arya, who is just beaming, completely convinced that Sophie is the most adorable thing ever. Takafuji, however, cuts right to the chase, asking if this supreme god is the same one that tried contacting him at the church. He doesn't even need her to answer. He already knows it's a yes. It seems the game is heating up faster than he anticipated if they're already sending femme fatales his way. So, he immediately demands she spill every last secret she knows. He makes it crystal clear that the alternative won't be pleasant. The poor thing is shaking like a leaf, totally rattled, until she suddenly musters up some courage, declaring that as a high-level spirit, she won't just crack that easily. He seems genuinely impressed by her nerve. So, she's really choosing to talk back, huh? Fine by him, he's got other methods. He gives her a little flick on the tummy or, wait, not the tummy, because a burst of hearts literally explodes out of her. Good grief. Takafuji is about to get a visit from the fantasy police, while the girls are blushing furiously, wanting to know what in the world that was. That's right, you tell him. Go ahead, try to cover up while literal hearts are floating around you. Then Betty just casually tosses her aside. Yikes. This is some classic, top-tier anime chaos. Anyway, a short while later, it looks like his unique interrogation method worked, as she's now guiding them into a nearby forest to get them some information. Turns out, she has to be physically present in certain spots to use her abilities. The strange thing is that her hair has now turned black, likely a side effect of the domination ability he used. Takafuji finds this absolutely fascinating. He never dreamed his power, which he thought only worked on living things, could actually influence a spirit. The hold on her doesn't feel as strong as his bond with Arya, but she was still, without a doubt, under his thumb. He asks where spirits usually hang out, and she basically says everywhere. She can't think of a single place they don't exist. This is terrible news for Takafuji. He can't sense spirits himself, which means he could be watched at any time and he'd be completely oblivious. So, he asks if she can spot them. She says she's not sure, but she'll give it a try. With a playful little wink, boom, dozens of spirits are suddenly revealed all around them. Arya is floored, calling her amazing, and she's just like, yeah, I already know. Even if she can't use high-level magic, she's got a ton of other tricks up her sleeve. For example, she can go completely invisible if she wants. Takafuji just watches, thinking this could be incredibly useful. Then Sophie reveals that after he dominated her, she noticed something new. Instead of her normal wind magic, she can now conjure this bizarre black wind. It looks more like smoke, and Takafuji recognizes it immediately. A light bulb goes off in his head and he says, this could be a game changer. The scene cuts to a trash part of the forest, with everyone just staring, stunned that the monster was torn clean in two. It's not totally clear if it was Sophie or Takafuji who did it, but it seems he's figured out how to combine her wind with his dark magic. The poor spirit is in shock. She never imagined her power could be used for something so destructive. If that creature hadn't been from the demon realm, it would have been completely vaporized. He asks what this whole demon realm thing is all about. She's like, well, picture a place filled with creatures from the demon world. A truly masterful explanation. Super helpful. What she can't figure out is why that thing even showed up here. That kind of monster has no business being in a forest like this. The king of the night hunt, Takafuji, agrees it's way out of place. Arya asks if Sophie has ever actually been to the demon realm, and she says no, but she can sense that the spirits in the forest are terrified. Arya adds that yeah, it's strange for creatures like that to just wander in on their own, which makes Takafuji wonder, why did that monster appear in this specific place? And would you look at that? Yep, it's times guy. The one we were suspicious of. The Demon King had a red beard, and so does this fella. It turns out there wasn't just one of them, but two. Sometime later, Takafuji's sword is finally done, and man, it looks incredibly basic. Arya is all excited, saying it looks really easy to wield. He agrees it's high quality, feeling like a natural extension of his arm right to the blade's tip. She mentions that she heard the craftsman is leaving town. It's a real shame, considering how amazing his work is. The butler confirms it. Carrie will be the last customer he serves in this city, but he's just glad Takafuji liked the sword. He suggests they might meet again somewhere else, just not here. Until next time, he says. Yeah, that old man definitely knows more than he's letting on. Outside, Arya is celebrating the fact they didn't have to pay out of their own pockets because that thing was not cheap. But thankfully, Takafuji just used Fanatik's money. Arya asks if he at least thanked her. He says, not a chance. She's the one who made him buy the weapon, so she can be the one to pay for it. And speak of the devil, look who's over there praying. You've got to be kidding me. Now Takafuji is the one walking up to her. He glances over, and it looks like she's checking out his new sword. She remarks that it's definitely high quality and very practical, but he points out that, as she's probably noticed, it isn't a magical weapon. His body just doesn't react well to that kind of energy. That's why she needs to get it through her head. No matter what she teaches him, he's not going to get any stronger. The widow just smiles and asks if he's already sick of training with her. Of course, he is. He flat out says he never liked it in the first place. And honestly, it's pointless to keep doing this. It's a total waste of time. These training sessions are done, and she's just wasting her time too. I thought she would be crushed, but nope. She just laughs and says it's true. Even if he dedicated his entire life to training, he'd probably stay at the same power level. That's why she'll stick right by his side until he does get stronger, because believing in people is her specialty. What the heck? Lady, he just turned you down. Get away from our boy. He's already got the ghost-busting spirit girl and the other clingy one. He mutters that she's just another annoying woman who won't leave him alone. But since that's the way it is, maybe it wouldn't hurt for him to put in a little more effort, too. The next chapter opens in a bar where some guy is eyeing a blonde woman, saying she has peculiar tastes and very luscious lips. Then he comments on another woman, noting that her body is in peak condition and that there's no way she's still uninitiated. Takafuji is drinking nearby and does a spit take, admitting the guy has a seriously good eye. The masked man says it's a skill he honed from spending so much time at the church. Since purity is so highly valued there, he eventually got pretty good at sensing it. And now, for some reason, our boy Takafuji is hanging out with this creep. Strangely enough, the guy was actually a fantastic conversationalist. So good, in fact, that Takafuji almost let a few of his own secrets slip out here and there. He's starting to suspect there's more to this than meets the eye. But hey, free food is free food, so who's complaining? Just then, Mask asks about the next contestant. And would you look at that, someone's walking in. Mask, ever the gentleman, immediately points out her distinctive swagger. She pulls off an innocent look, but she's got a certain aura. Yeah, we're not going to repeat his exact words. A single glance at her on the scoreboard tells you the whole story. Takafuji promptly bonks him on the head with 2 branches. Seriously, stop manhandling the female patrons. You guys trying to get this place shut down? The idiots mumble an apology as the girl heads out. Takafuji then asks Mask why he's constantly hovering around him instead of watching over Fanatique. Mask explains that the only reason he's even keeping an eye on her is because Takafuji is nearby. On top of that, there's some kind of big exam coming up. This city is the testing ground where the other priestesses come to face their trials. And by the looks of it, Fanatique is about to either completely dominate or get absolutely wrecked. These exams are no joke. Of course, the church is pretty confused about Takafuji's presence, especially since Fanatique, who normally takes this stuff super seriously, has been spending all of her time with him lately. Takafuji asks if she's any good. Mask replies that she's hitting the final levels of her training and is giving it her all. Then, the door swings open again. And speak of the devil, it's the Demon King himself, the king of booze, that is. Takafuji gives the old guy a casual nod and says he needs a favor. The bearded man tells him to clean up his own messes. They fall into some lighthearted trash talk, but it's obvious the old man knows Takafuji isn't your average Joe, even if our hero is still clueless. All of a sudden, Mask says he's taking off. Apparently, he and this old-timer don't exactly get along. Takafuji just asks him to send his apologies to Fanatique. Before he leaves, the bearded man tells Takafuji to be more careful about the company he keeps, but Takafuji fires back that he's not about to take life advice from a guy everyone else ignores. He waves goodbye to Mask, but then Sophie speaks up, her voice coming from his shadow, asking how he can even be near that man. Even from her hiding spot, she feels a powerful, instinctual need to get away. He's absolutely certain this man is fully aware that spirits exist. The old man then says aloud, Takafuji's new companion must be a rather high-level spirit. Takafuji realizes this guy isn't hiding a thing. The old man just remarks that the timing is perfect. Now he knows for a fact that Takafuji can see souls and use spiritual abilities. Arya looks totally baffled as Takafuji activates his special vision. What he sees is an overload. The name Igno, race, demon dragon beast, chimera homunculus, divine protection, reincarnated, divine punishment. Way too much info to parse, but one line says it all. Current demon lord, that's the part that really matters. Takafuji is floored, completely frozen to the spot. He immediately starts sweating bullets. Arya seems to sense something is seriously wrong too. And just like that, the demon lord asks if they should take this outside. He says there aren't many people around, so it might be better for him and for Takafuji Leori. Hold on, he just said his full name. He's not supposed to know that. Arya picks up on it instantly. Takafuji stands up and says, sure, that's fine. Arya says she's coming with him, but he gives her a direct order to stay right where she is. Because of their pact, she's locked in place, unable to budge. Out in the forest, the demon lord tells him to relax and asks if the location is suitable, but Takafuji doesn't utter a word. He's just silent, staring. The demon lord admits it's hard to ask someone not to be on edge in a situation like this. Suddenly, he lets his aura flare out, and instantly, the spirit hiding in Takafuji's shadow starts to come apart. He says he doesn't want any spirits eavesdropping on their conversation. Poor Sophie. She collapses on the spot. The demon lord apologizes, but says that unfortunately, it's just the two of them now. Then he continues, take a good look. The guy's got a mix of elf ears, droopy demon horns, and even some dog ears. He's a real mishmash of parts. He then asks Takafuji what comes to mind when looking at him. I mean, it's obvious, right? We're all thinking it. This guy's a total mess. Just a chaotic swirl of everything with a beard slapped on for good measure. The demon lord admits as much. He knows his appearance is repulsive. He even points out his tail. He belongs to the chimera homunculus race. Originally, he was just a regular demon like any other, but he acquired this body during his second reincarnation. He then figures that Takafuji must have come from another world, too, which means this is his second life. But for the demon lord, it's actually his third. He was originally born in this world as a demon, serving as the demon lord 2 generations back. In his first life, The guy was just ridiculously powerful. He took whatever he wanted and crushed anyone who stood in his way, seizing all the wealth, women, and power for himself. He just laughed at anyone who dared to challenge him. After wiping out every other race, he got bored and even started taking out other demons, boasting, "I slaughtered the dwarves and took their treasures. I torched the forests of those irritating elves. I annihilated the beastkin and the dragon clans too." And he'd laugh, thinking to himself, "At last, I'm truly free. This is happiness." Or so he thought. He kept chasing that feeling he called happiness, but surprise, surprise, the story doesn't have a happy ending. He died on his feet, still in the middle of a fight, a true warrior's end. Takafuji asks, "So, you were killed?" The guy just scoffs. "No, I never ran into anyone strong enough to kill me, but even I had a lifespan." And once his time was up, he woke up in a completely empty, white void. A little girl with white hair just appeared right in front of him. For a second, he thought the feds had finally caught up to him, but nope, he had met God. Takafuji watches him, wondering if it was the same goddess he met when he first got here. But the guy clarifies that she introduced herself as the goddess of times, this time's world. And right away, Takafuji realizes it's not the same one. The goddess he met was the goddess of times, all times, worlds. Agno continues, explaining that according to her, he had basically gone way too far. So, she stripped him of all his memories, his magic, his strength, and his talent. Then, she reincarnated him in a place they call the Abandoned World. Takafuji's eyes narrow at that. He asks what that place is, and the guy lays it out cold. "The world you came from. Our world. Earth." As the name suggests, it's a world the gods couldn't care less about. Having lost everything, he was born to an average family, lived an average life, and absolutely nothing interesting ever happened. He did his best to get by, found a job, made a living, and just kept his head down to stay out of trouble. He even married a kind woman who, he casually adds, wasn't especially pretty or anything special. Man, that's cold. Still, they managed to have a kid, a beautiful boy, even though their home was a mess and money was always tight. And yeah, they'd get into arguments every now and then, just like any other couple. But it was a genuine life. Wild. After living like the ultimate evil, the guy spent his next life as a total 9-to-5er. Talk about a complete 180. And yet, that ordinary life was what finally made him happy. Back when he was the demon lord who had everything, he was convinced that was happiness. But he died without ever truly understanding what it meant. So now, he says he wants to help other people find their own happiness. Takafuji is completely lost. Who in the world is this guy talking about? But the man just says, "I'll do what I can with the body I was given." Takafuji immediately asks if that means he's planning to kill everyone again. The man just shakes his head. "That's not what I meant at all." He reminds him that he's a chimera, a homunculus. When he was summoned, they used multiple races to construct his body. All in all, he's a blend of 6 different species, the very same 6 races that carved up this world and are still at each other's throats. Takafuji just stands there, a little blown away. This whole story confirms that there really are 6 major races, but then he starts to wonder out loud. Does this guy even have a clue how this world actually operates? And the Demon Lord states it plainly, "Of course I do. I'm painfully aware of how I'm treated here." He says it becomes obvious the second he walks into any tavern. This world was intentionally designed to make sure the different races could never get along. Maybe Takafuji doesn't quite grasp it, since he came from a world where different people managed to coexist. Actually, he probably gets it. Let's give the kid some credit. Still, our hero just wants to know, "So what's your big plan to save everyone, old man?" Agno lights his pipe and says, "I'm going to destroy this entire world. Now, give me your hand." That was definitely not the plan Takafuji was expecting. Now he's just staring, completely baffled. Agno explains that at first, he wasn't sure what to do, but meeting Takafuji changed his plans. So Takafuji asks if he's going to be threatened or punished if he refuses. But Agno just says, "No, you're free to do as you please. Telling you all this is just my way of paying you for your help so far. The truth is, even if you don't want to help, you will, just by staying alive while I tear everything down. You'll end up cooperating with me one way or another. As long as you don't die and keep rampaging across the world, destroying things and ruining lives, you'll be helping me by default." The look he gives Takafuji is intense, and our guy is just speechless for a moment. But finally, he says it's pretty selfish to dump all that on him and then expect something back. To be fair, he's not exactly eager to take a dirt nap for anyone else, either. Still, he insists the current offer for his cooperation isn't nearly enough. He's demanding more, which leaves Agno looking totally lost. Takafuji explains that he's been exhausted since showing up in this world, and it's about time someone paid his tab. But wait a minute, is Takafuji actually planning to throw himself into that chaotic mess, too? We cut back to the bar in a flashback. Arya had been left behind, just standing there as she watched him walk out of her life. Now, she's all by herself in the forest, hugging her knees and trying to figure out why he told her not to follow him. In that very moment, she realized Lee Nori was more on edge than she'd ever seen him. She thought she could be useful, but the first thing he did was give her the cold shoulder. As she's lost in her own little emotional storm, a pack of wolves silently closes in behind her. But let's be perfectly clear, Arya is one of the most lethal hunters walking this earth. And hey, speak of the devil, look who shows up. Fanatique. What's a girl like you doing in a place like this? Before Arya can even blink, Fanatique slams one of the wolves straight into the ground. The rest of them scatter like leaves in the wind. Arya thanks her, and Fanatique says it's no big deal. But then she immediately lays into her, asking if she knows this is monster territory. Why are you out here completely zoned out? Considering Arya's reputation as the Black Rose, for her to be this distracted, something major must be on her mind. Arya hesitates for a moment before saying it's nothing. Fanatique, however, drops a bombshell, saying they're one and the same. She says Arya is just like Kiri, and then suddenly lunges at her. Luckily, Arya is quick enough to dodge. What are you doing? Why are you coming after me? Fanatique just grins, saying she was curious to test out Kiri's legendary partner. Plus, she noticed Arya seemed down and figured a little sparring would liven things up. Arya dodges again, asking what in the world Fanatique is thinking, but the girl just keeps pressing the attack, commenting on how excellent her reflexes are. Then, totally out of left field, Fanatique asks, when you were a kid, did you believe in God? Arya is, understandably, confused. Fanatique explains that she never did, even though her mother was extremely religious, never missing even a single prayer. But she never once told Fanatique to pray herself, a classic case of reverse psychology from a very clever woman. But apparently, all those prayers didn't help when it mattered. One day, they were attacked, and her mother died right in front of her. Surrounded by monsters, she was absolutely certain she was about to die, too. She had given up on everything. That was the first time in her life she put her hands together and prayed with every ounce of her soul. All she wanted was to go to heaven and be with her mother. But when she begged for that release, God actually appeared and denied her. Pretty incredible. She says she still doesn't quite know what saved her that day, but because of what happened, she now believes in God. That's why she doesn't just pray these days. She also spreads the word of the Lady God, as she calls her. Fanatique reminds her that she's a strong ally of Kiri's, and she needs to get back to him and have his back. That's why her place is by his side. And then boom, it's an emotional eruption. Arya screams that she wants to be by Kiri's side, and bam. She lands a solid punch right in Fanatique's face. Arya asks if she's okay, noting that her own punch carries a serious kick. So serious, in fact, that Fanatique is knocked out cold because, as it turns out, all she really wanted was a nice, warm lap to rest on. Fanatique sighs, admitting that she's a little frustrated too. She just can't seem to figure Kiri out. She had hoped that since Arya spent more time with him, she might have a better read on the guy. Arya replies that with Fanatique's abilities, she's sure she'll figure it out eventually. In any case, she thanks her for the help. Later that night, under the soft moonlight, Arya is kicking back at home when he suddenly materializes. Hey, she jumps, completely startled. He tells her to relax, explaining that he just traveled through the shadows because it was quicker. He also mentions he has some critical information to share. Arya lets out a breath she didn't realize she was holding, relieved that nothing bad happened. He playfully asks if she was worried, and she actually admits that, yeah, she was. If he had just gone into the forest and died like a total idiot, that would be a really pathetic end to the story. And besides, even if he did die, she's not convinced she'd actually be free. She says all this with a smile, which he doesn't miss. She then asks him why he's so quiet. He brushes it off, saying she just seems particularly energetic and that he needs her help with an experiment. Oh boy, here we go with the experiments again. She asks what it is and why he's got that weird smirk on his face. He just says, "You'll see soon enough." I really thought it was going to be some bizarre experiment on her. But nope, the next scene cuts to a church. I knew it. I called it from the very beginning. Man, this dude is seriously bad news. A real wolf in the henhouse. Turns out, Mask is there asking what he needs. The guy's demanding to know if they've located the girl who skipped town after that whole betrayal fiasco. He's got to be talking about Arya, right? Mask tries to smooth things over, apologizing and promising they'll find her soon, even though it's been tough. But this psycho just tosses a nun aside and demands they get a move on and bring the girl to him. He wants her put to work immediately. Apparently, for the next big ritual, they're going to need a whole lot more priestesses. He lays it out plain and simple. If they want to grow their cult, they've got to build up their reputation. Mask, holding it together like a pro, claims it's all for a higher purpose. But man, this new guy gives off some seriously creepy vibes. A little while later, Mask barges into his private quarters and throws himself into a chair, grumbling that this creep has another thing coming if he thinks he can just be pushed aside. Okay, can someone please fill me in on this soap opera? I'm totally lost. Meanwhile, over at some moonlit castle grate, more weirdos are crawling out of the woodwork. The villain convention is getting bigger by the minute. They're all gathered around, agreeing that their current level of chaos isn't cutting it. They need to ramp things up, way up. Step 1 on their evil to-do list: devour the entire forest. The next morning, we learn that Arya was apparently devoured. I swear, I never know what Takafuji means by that. Is it like a vampire bite? Something else? Your guess is as good as mine. She casually explains that this is just Takafuji's whole deal. He's got zero energy during the day and sleeps a ton. This gets Sophie's gears turning, thinking that at least one part of her escape plan is becoming crystal clear. If she's going to make a break for it, it's got to be in the morning. Just then, they reach their destination, and this super crucial spot is a cake shop. You heard me. And just like that, we've unlocked the filler episode. I'm sure this is Sophie's favorite story arc. Aaliyah is absolutely floored to find out Sophie isn't a fan of cake. Sophie points out that she's not a normal human who needs to eat, so it's only natural she wouldn't be into it. But when she sees Aaliyah looking kind of bummed out, Sophie caves and agrees to have some. She says she'll eat it just to cheer her up. And what do you know? She actually likes it. We are definitely in peak filler territory, folks. Later, Aaliyah is all fired up, vowing that one day she's going to knock that guy into next week. Just because he saved her doesn't mean she enjoys being his subordinate. Sure, she's thankful, but that's a completely different issue. She's just biding her time until she's strong enough to leave him in the dust. Sophie, however, looks thoroughly unimpressed by this declaration. She just comments that their whole dynamic is a little strange. Then out of nowhere, Fenrir shows up telling them they have to get to the forest or what's left of it, anyway. The entire area has been scoured clean. The two of them show up and just stare in disbelief, trying to figure out how a whole forest could just disappear in one night. And it's not just the trees, the grass, the creatures, everything is just gone. Fenrir remarks that it's tough to even picture what kind of being could be responsible for this level of destruction. Sophie chimes in that even the nature spirits have vanished, noting this is way beyond the scope of any human. Without a second thought, Arya shoots into the sky, announcing she's going to check it out. She soars high above, scanning the landscape from every angle. Fenrir calls up to ask if she's seen anything, and she reports that the trail of destruction looks much more recent in one specific direction. She figures if she can connect the dots between all the ruined zones, she can probably map out their travel path. But the real priority is identifying who or what is responsible for all this. Sophie speaks up, mentioning that the spirits farther up the path are terrified. She suggests that maybe, just maybe, pressing forward isn't the best idea. Aaliyah, naturally, blows right past that warning and says she senses something coming from the mountains. And surprise, surprise, it's those giant worm creatures. The same freaky centipede monsters belonging to that strange girl. The 15-legged nightmares are crawling everywhere, ripping up the land and eating everything in sight. Aaliyah recognizes them instantly. They're the exact same monsters she encountered in the forest before, except this time, there's a whole army of them. Sophie quickly tells them they need to duck back into the trees before they're seen. As she tracks their movement, Aaliyah figures out exactly where they're headed. They're making a beeline for a farm she assisted on a past mission, near the city of Rien, which is the very same city where Takafuji got his new weapon. Now, wait a minute. Remember how that blacksmith was skipping town? It's starting to feel like somebody had a tip-off. Rien has dealt with monster attacks in the past, but there's always been some kind of official warning or a quest issued by the church. This time, though, radio silence. Not even a whisper of a heads-up, which means this attack is completely off the books. Sophie wonders if they should maybe give that guy, meaning Takafuji, a warning. Aaliyah agrees and tells her to go find their lord and get him over here. Fenrir volunteers to be the one to grab him, but asks what exactly she has in mind. Aaliyah starts thinking about how Takafuji is obsessed with keeping his true power under wraps, but he'd never turn his back on a threat to the kingdom. With the faces of those she's already lost flashing in her mind, she makes her choice. She's going to fight, but this time, it'll be on her own terms. Fenrir chimes in, warning her he can literally smell how strong these things are. He's basically saying they're way out of her league and she doesn't have a prayer, but she couldn't care less. Fueled by a sudden surge of confidence, she whips out her sword, declaring she's not the same weak girl she used to be. This time, she's ready for a real fight. One of the slimy worm beasts spots them, its disgusting maw gaping open as it lunges, but Aaliyah beats it to the punch. Hold on, was that her attack? She just obliterated it. Fenrir's just watching, completely stunned, and points out that her power was practically screaming for attention before she even drew her blade. Actually, that might have been a bit of a critique. He's telling her she's telegraphing her moves way too much. Maybe that's how the enemy got a beat on her. Regardless, one of them got turned into Monster Chow. Still, he gives her props, even if he thinks her technique is sloppy. He respects that iron-willed determination to protect people. He admits he can't stick around in this temporary form forever. But for as long as he can, she's got his full power at her back. After all, he and his fallen comrades once defended this very land. Aaliyah just blurts out that Fenrir suddenly got gigantic, and he realizes this is the first time he's ever revealed his true form to anyone. And with that, the epic duo gets down to business. Aaliyah dives in first, landing a perfect, clean slash. Fenrir's impressed, admitting she's not half bad. She quickly thanks him for having her back. It's a blur of flashing blades and dying monsters, and everything seems to be going great, until they realize they're facing way more enemies than they thought. But Fenrir knows the game plan: thin the herd, and the damage to the area goes down. Arya gets it instantly and charges right back into the fray. The two of them press the attack as a team. Sophie's just watching from the sidelines, completely floored. She had no clue they were this powerful. Arya is holding nothing back. She's throwing everything she has at them, slashes, wind magic, the works. She even tries her fireball spell, but explosions? Not a chance. Her magic is just too weak and keeps getting swatted away. Fenrir tells her to start conserving her energy, pointing out that these creatures are super resistant to her kind of magic. And then he drops the bomb. Get ready for some tough love. Remember that woman from before, Ayana? Yeah, well, Fenrir says she was way better with a sword. He tells Arya she needs to learn that same level of refined magical control. Ouch, talk about a low blow. I mean, the girl used to be a princess, and now he's expecting her to fight like a seasoned war commander. Still, she knows Fenrir and Ayana were close, so if anyone's qualified to teach her, it's definitely him. Another monster charges in, and Arya realizes she needs to stop spamming mana and start cutting smarter. And just like that, she lands another solid hit. Meanwhile, Fenrir is just tearing through these things with raw, physical power, but Arya is starting to hit her limit. She can feel she doesn't have many swings left in the tank. Her mana is almost completely drained. It was bound to happen, but the reality is hitting her hard now. She's still got a long way to go. Fenrir begs her to just hold on a little longer, but she's already letting out a scream. But wait, that wasn't a scream of pain. Did she just bite something? Right, she's a vampire. The fangs are fully functional. She doesn't actually need to eat, but maybe this was her ace in the hole, a way to absorb energy directly. The fight rages on, but someone is watching from the shadows, and she is clearly not happy with what's going down. It's that mysterious woman from before. She clenches her fist, and suddenly, every single centipede monster zeroes in on their position. Hey, back off. Don't you dare mess with my waifu. Whoa, what's gotten into me? Why am I so invested? Anyway, Fenrir senses something is wrong. Sophie screams for her to watch out. But it's too late. One of the monsters lunges and rips her arm clean off. Please, tell me she's got some kind of high-speed regeneration. She just stands there, trembling, staring at the bloody stump. She's in total shock, not even processing what happened. Then, bam, another hit. A massive tail whip sends her flying. Fenrir manages to cushion the impact, but the assault isn't over. A second monster dives in, jaws wide open for the kill. Sophie throws up a barrier just in the nick of time, blocking the attack. A bit of Fenrir's fur gets in the monster's eye, giving him the opening to clamp his own jaws on its mouth. Absolutely brutal. Arya is in bad shape. Fenrir glances over, desperately asking if she's okay. He's begging her to wake up, screaming that they have to retreat. Right now, Sophie sees it too. If they don't get out of there, Arya is going to die. But just as things look hopeless, Arya hears a familiar voice calling her name. It's Amanda, her sister. Arya is just lying there, barely conscious, staring at the ghostly figure. Amanda just laughs, mocking her for being in the same pathetic mess all over again. She sneers that they were always the weak ones. Is she just going to run away and save herself like last time? But wait, Amanda was beheaded. She's dead. So why is she smiling like that? And then, slowly, Arya starts to get back on her feet, insisting the real Amanda would never say something like that. This vision is just a figment born from her own weakness. And that's okay, because it's still damn good to see her face one last time. She admits she was too weak to save her back then, but things are different now. And Amanda's about to get a front row seat to the show. Sophie's just staring, totally lost. Did Arya just pop up with a brand new arm, or is she still working with a stump? Fenrir just yells for her to get on his back. They need to bolt before they're swarmed again. But then Arya barely even twitches her foot, and a wave of energy slices clean through the monster. Fenrir is completely floored, and all she says is for them to get out of there without her. She's staying to finish the fight. That's when he tells her that being a hero is cool and all, but dying here would be a total waste. Just then, at the entrance, the man of the hour appears, and the way everything just stops, you'd think he was about to fix her arm with a single glance. He reminds her that for a vampire, blood is everything. He went out of his way to share his, so she could at least try not to waste it. She's a wreck of emotions, completely overwhelmed that he actually came for her, but he's about as sentimental as a brick. He just tells her she totally lost her cool. She was so out of it, she didn't even see what was happening around her. He steps off a monster he just killed, drives his blade into another, and finishes it in one fluid motion. Fenrir goes wild. The master has arrived. Takafuji points out that the joints are their weak spots. She should have realized that and saved her mana. Finally, he pulls out her severed arm and tells her to try and keep her limbs attached from now on. The King of Stitches reattaches it with a bit of flair, jump-starting her recovery. But the lecture isn't over. He tells her she made a ton of mistakes, the biggest one being that she didn't ditch the city when she had the chance. Why was she so hung up on this place? Barely standing on death's door, Arya just apologizes, admitting she acted like an idiot. He tells her straight up, it doesn't matter how many of these things you kill. You are not saving this city. More monsters crawl out of the woodwork, and he says she's about to find out why. The beasts burrow into the ground as that creepy girl starts wiggling her fingers. In a flash, a massive shadow hand erupts from the earth, but Takafuji is already behind her. He says he knows she's the puppet master pulling all the strings. The girl turns to look, but he's already trapped her in a cage of threads. She's busted. Sophie is bewildered. 1 second, Takafuji was right next to them. Now he's clear across the mountain, and it looks like he just snagged somebody. Takafuji sizes up the girl and uses his ability. He gets a positive ID. Chris Camisel, confirmed by her stats and skills. There's no doubt about it. She's the one who can control magical beasts. The attacks on the city always followed the same script, and the Church of Raven was always there to play the hero. Raven, the so-called savior, is worshipped like a god. His church is even considered some sacred training ground for women. The whole thing just seems a little too perfect, and now, at last, they know who's been setting up these monster attacks. Chris just smirks, saying he's done his research, but it's a pity he doesn't have the full story. Takafuji steps closer and says he has a very talkative informant. The rest of the details he'll get right now. He activates his Mystic Hypnosis eye, but of course, she just smiles right back at him. If they're talking magic circles, she knows a few tricks herself, and as usual, his special eye fails. Again, this cursed thing has a 0% success rate. Suddenly, a glowing magic circle appears under them, and creatures begin clawing their way out of the ground. To the shock of absolutely no one but Takafuji, his mental attack totally fizzles. Chris just cackles. She says now he'll see her true power. She does every little thing that man tells her to. And yep, she was really dumb enough to team up with that guy just for some attention on this video, all to help Mamoru make more of